Chapter 486. After a while Yi Xian leaned against the wall. At this moment he was speechless. What kind of temper did this second floor almighty have? Attacking at the slightest provocation was simply inhumane. The second floor almighty looked at Yi Xian. You have to understand that this prison pagoda might not truly submit to you. Yi Xian looked at the second floor almighty. The second floor almighty said softly, the reason why it recognizes you as its master is most likely because of the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman can suppress these existences here. Moreover, it should be afraid of the plain-dressed woman. Submitting to you will allow it to gain the approval and support of the plain-dressed woman. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. This feeling is very uncomfortable. The second floor almighty looked at Yi Xian. What's uncomfortable about it? Yi Xian shook his head. All along I thought it chose me because it liked me. The second floor almighty said, actually this is also a possibility. As she spoke she looked at Yi Xian. These are not important. What is important is that you have to understand one thing. It is stronger than you, much stronger. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. However, I have no choice, right? The second floor almighty was silent. Did Yi Xian have a choice? In fact, he had no choice. Choose not to take the prison pagoda? The problem was that the prison pagoda had found him, not that he had chosen the prison pagoda. The second floor almighty shook her head. At this moment she suddenly felt a little lost. Because in the unseen world, many things seem to have been predestined. Yi Xian suddenly stood up and smiled. Actually, I should thank it. The second floor almighty looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Because it has brought me many benefits. For example, you, the Space Dao Law, the Grand Dao Law, and Miss Jen. And you all have helped me. And that sword that left. I can't only see the disadvantages, can I? The second floor almighty nodded. It's good that you have such a mentality. Yi Xian looked up at the fifth floor. As for the fifth floor, as he spoke, he looked at the almighty on the second floor. If I didn't have the help of the plain-dressed girl, I wouldn't have any chance of winning? The almighty on the second floor didn't say anything. Yi Xian asked again, why isn't the fifth floor making a move yet? The great god on the second floor said, it's because of that sword. But soon the other party will make a move. At this point she looked at Yi Xian. I can feel that it won't take more than 5 days. 5 days? Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. With that he left the world prison pagoda. After Yi Xian left, the almighty came to the fourth floor. She walked to the entrance to the fifth floor. Can't we talk? After a moment of silence, the sound of footsteps suddenly rang out from the fifth floor. The face of the god on the second floor changed drastically. After a few breaths, blood slowly flowed from the corner of the second floor god's mouth. At the same time, a chuckle sounded from the fifth floor. Talk? What right does an ant have to talk to me? As the voice fell, the footsteps began to move towards the entrance. At this moment, above the top of the pagoda, a sword suddenly flew down. The next moment, the sword directly entered the fifth floor. Buzz! The sound of a sword rang out from the fifth floor. A moment later, the sword left the fifth floor and returned to the top of the pagoda. In the fifth floor, a voice suddenly sounded. The sword is not bad, but I don't know how the owner of the sword is. The almighty on the second floor looked at the fifth floor. You should be able to see it. The almighty on the fifth floor laughed. The sword has left this pagoda. I think it's going to find its owner. I hope its owner isn't too weak. Otherwise when I come out it will be a lot less fun. The face of the almighty on the second floor darkened. The fifth floor was actually waiting for the owner of the sword. Was this arrogance? Arrogance? Or confidence? At this moment she thought of Jen Zizi. This woman was the best fighter in the Protoss. And she had personally experienced the strength of this woman. However, the other party could only be locked up on the fourth floor. The strength of the fifth floor was definitely above Jen Zizi. After a moment, the almighty on the second floor turned and left. After Yi Xian left the world prison pagoda, he came to the mountain range where he used to cultivate. In the dense forest, Yi Xian walked slowly. In the dense forest, a light breeze blew, a little chilly. From Qingqing until now, he had experienced a lot and seen a lot. Now he was no longer naive and only wanted to live a peaceful life. In this kind of world, a peaceful life was undoubtedly courting death. Because one day the whole world might suddenly be destroyed. Yi Xian looked up at the sky. At this moment, what he could see in the sky was a huge star net. The other world. The Sky River sector. The fifth floor. These people all wanted him dead. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Unknowingly, he had fallen into a desperate situation again. No, from Qingqing until now, his situation had never been good. Survival. Yi Xian continued to walk forward. He found that he could no longer think about swordsmanship or martial arts. What he needed to do now was to live well. If he died, what would happen to his sister? What would happen to his mother? At this thought, Yi Xian's expression gradually became somewhat sinister. What? He had to live well. Yi Xian opened his right hand, and a sword appeared in his hand. Immortal Spirit Sword. Yi Xian held the sword and pointed it at the ground. Soon, two kinds of sword intents suddenly appeared around him. One black and one white, one good and one evil. Good. Evil? He had never particularly understood good and evil because in the world, good and evil were often decided by the strong. The winner was king and the loser was a bandit. The emperors of the world, as long as they were defeated, they were bandits. As long as they were victorious, no matter how evil they were, they could also become good. Good and evil were determined by one's fist. But was that really the case? Perhaps so, but in his opinion, good and evil were in the human heart. Good was good and evil was evil. Good and evil were determined by one's heart, not by others. He protected his sister, protected his mother, fought for himself, and fought for the never-ending starfield. That was good. At this thought, the sword intent of kindness in front of Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a sword light and shot into the sky. In the void, the sword intent turned into sword light and circled continuously. On top of the great wall of heaven burial wall, Wei Yang Tian looked up at the wisp of sword intent above the mountain range, deep in thought. Beside her was Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai said softly, "His sword intent?" Wei Yang Tian nodded. Mr. Bai thought for a moment, then said, "I underestimated him." Wei Yang Tian looked at the distant horizon and in her mind that scene from back then. That scene that she could not forget. In the dense forest, the sword intent in the sky transformed into a pure white sword and flew back to Yi Xian. It floated quietly in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent. Kindness. The kindness of the woman in the plain dress could change mountains and rivers with a single thought. Because of her powerful strength, she could determine the life and death of all things with a single thought. The kindness and evil of the woman in the plain dress transcended herself in the great Tao. He was far from being able to do that, so there was no need for him to learn from the woman in the plain dress. His kindness was to live well, protect his sister, protect his mother, and protect everything he wanted to protect. It was that simple. At this thought, Yi Xian reached out with his left hand and grasped the pure white sword. The pure white sword trembled slightly and suddenly disappeared. But in the next moment, the sword reappeared 100 zhang away. It did not travel through space, but wherever his kindness went, the sword would go. The sword of kindness was born from the heart and condensed from thoughts. It was not restricted by space and was not trapped by heaven and earth. What was evil? Was killing evil? What about killing those who deserved to be killed? Whether it was good or evil, it was determined by one's heart. He would not kill those who should not be killed, but he would kill those who deserved to be killed, and he would kill them ruthlessly. Good and evil were determined, and the heart and mind were connected. Two swords suddenly flew out in front of Yi Xian. They were swords condensed from the sword of kindness and evil. Different from the sword of Qi, they were not restricted by space and could appear anywhere he wanted. Compared to the sword of Qi, they were even more mysterious. The two swords represented his way of the sword. At this moment, the two swords suddenly returned to him. Yi Xian took out the Moke sword. In the next moment, the two swords transformed into one black and 100 white sword rays that entered the Moke sword. Yi Xian held the Moke sword in his hand. Endless Moke power entered his body. About an hour later, Yi Xian's lips curled into a smile. After the good and evil sword intents were suppressed, the killing intent could no longer affect him. Not only that, but even the Moke power could be suppressed by his sword intent. The sword of kindness and evil could suppress the killing intent. It was not over yet. Yi Xian sat down cross-legged and waved his right hand. 9 Saint-grade swords appeared in front of him. In the next moment he picked up a sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. He began to madly absorb the energy of the swords. Cultivate. Become stronger. This was his current goal. As one sword after another was devoured by Yi Xian, the aura emanating from his body quickly grew stronger and stronger. The painter came to a mountain. This mountain towered in the clouds. Above the clouds, cranes flew by from time to time. It was like a fairyland. The painter walked to a large hall. At this moment, a white-haired woman appeared in front of him. The white-haired woman looked at the painter. "What are you doing here?" The painter smiled. "Senior sister, I..." The white-haired woman shook her head. "From the moment you left the Shen Gate, we were no longer senior sister and junior sister." The painter smiled. "Senior sister, you have known me since I was young. You know that I have no desire for the position of Xian Gate sect master. Making me the sect master is the same as taking my life. The white-haired woman looked at the painter. Do you not want to be the sect master, or do you not want to compete with me? The painter said softly, in my heart, you will always be that senior sister who took care of me since I was young. No matter what, it is not as important as you. The white-haired woman looked at the painter. After a moment, her eyes became somewhat complicated. You are the most outstanding genius of our Xian Gate. If you become the sect master, Xian Gate will definitely prosper. The painter shook his head. I am too lazy. I do not like these trivial matters. If I do it, Xian Gate will only be a mess. With senior sister here, Xian Gate will become better. In fact, Xian Gate will also be better than before. The white-haired woman said softly, are you praising me? The painter smiled. Senior sister, this time I came to ask for your help. The white-haired woman asked, never-ending star field? The painter nodded. The white-haired woman was silent. The painter asked, what is it? The white-haired woman opened her palm. A sword of order was in her hand. Seeing this sword of order, the painter's face instantly darkened. The white-haired woman looked up at the horizon and said softly, 9 star fields, 12 saint-rank mercenary groups, 26 mutant sorcerers, 72 saint-rank knights. Who can stop them? As she spoke, she looked at the painter. Leave never-ending star field. The painter was silent. P.S. My hope in this lifetime is if Sword Domain can be made into an animation, that would be great. However, it is also difficult. I heard that making an animation is even more expensive than a television series. Chapter 487. Leave the never-ending starfield. The painter fell silent. In front of the painter, the white-haired woman said softly, the never-ending starfield can't stop them. The painter smiled, but we can't just give up like this, right? The white-haired woman looked at the painter. You should know that if you stay, you will only be sending yourself to death. The painter said softly, perhaps. With that, she turned and left. The white-haired woman suddenly said, Master. The painter didn't stop. She continued walking forward. She couldn't speak anymore. Because if the mystic gate joined in, it would only be a meaningless sacrifice. At this moment, a woman appeared in front of the painter. Her clothes were as white as snow, untainted by a speck of dust. The white-haired woman was stunned. Little N. The woman in front of her was Enlancio. The painter sized up Enlancio and said with a smile, Senior sister, I heard that a very good genius appeared in our mystic gate. Is it her? The white-haired woman nodded, yes. The painter smiled, not bad at all. Enlancio looked straight at the painter. I will go with you. The painter was stunned. The white-haired woman frowned. Little N. Enlancio looked at the white-haired woman and said softly, Sect Master, he and I are friends. The white-haired woman said in a low voice, Do you know what he is facing now? Enlancio said, Then all the more I should go. The white-haired woman stared at Enlancio. You are not allowed. Enlancio shook her head. You can't stop me. The white-haired woman was about to attack when the painter suddenly said, Senior sister, let her go with me. The white-haired woman looked at the painter and frowned. Are you crazy? The painter smiled. Senior sister, she should experience such a great battle. I know what senior sister is worried about. I will guarantee senior sister that she will be safe. Is that all right? The white-haired woman glanced at Enlancio. You must go. Enlancio nodded. The white-haired woman sighed softly and waved her right hand. A seal that seemed to be cast from ice appeared in front of Enlancio. Enlancio was stunned, puzzled. The painter smiled. The mystic ice seal, my mystic gate's most precious treasure, accept it. Enlancio accepted the mystic ice seal and bowed to the white-haired woman. The white-haired woman looked at the two of them. Come back safely. The artist nodded. I will do my best. As soon as she finished speaking, she brought Enlancio along and vanished on the spot. After the two of them left, an old man appeared behind the white-haired woman, and the old man said in a low voice, Sect Master, you shouldn't have let that girl leave. The white-haired woman shook her head. Shaoan is very stubborn. We can't change her mind. The old man said, She is our most outstanding genius. The white-haired woman said softly, That's why we can't keep them in captivity. As she spoke, she looked up at the horizon. The star enforcers. How can the never-ending star domain stop them? A man sat cross-legged on the peak of a mountain. His eyes were slightly closed as if he had entered a meditative state. This person was Emosia. Not far behind Emosia was the hunchbacked old man. When the sky darkened, Wuxia, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly stood up. In the next moment, a powerful aura swept out from his body, but very quickly this aura disappeared. The hunchbacked elder asked, "You broke through?" Wuxia nodded slightly. At that moment he had reached the creation realm from the sage realm. In terms of realm, it could be said that he was among the top experts on this continent. Wuxia looked up at the starry sky. In the starry sky the star web was still there. The hunchbacked elder suddenly said, "No matter what, you must live. You are the hope." Wuxia shook his head. "The Moke clan has no deserters. I can be the last to die, but I will never be the last to live." As he spoke, he looked at the hunchbacked elder. "Patriarch, take me to the ancestors." The hunchbacked elder hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Soon the two of them disappeared. In the mountain range of the Great Wall of Burial Sky, Yixian had already devoured all the swords. At that moment he was very calm, and the aura emitted from his body was also very calm. Not far to the right of Yixian, Lian Wanli leaned against a large tree with her arms crossed. She looked at Yixian, and beside her was Xiao Linger. This little guy would often come out for a stroll now. After an unknown period of time, Yixian suddenly opened his eyes. In his eyes, there was a pair of blood-red pupils. The Moke eye. Now he had already used this pair of pupils as his own eyes. For the time being it was not bad. Not far away, Lian Wanli suddenly said, "What realm?" Yixian looked at Lian Wanli. "Ethereal opening." Lian Wanli frowned slightly. "What?" Yixian smiled. "I cultivate in adversity. I walk through every realm again." Lian Wanli walked in front of Yixian. "Cultivate in adversity?" Yixian nodded, then explained to Lian Wanli. After a while, Lian Wanli asked curiously, "How does it feel to cultivate like this?" Yixian said softly, "Walking through it again there will be many new discoveries." Lian Wanli smiled. "Fight?" Yixian smiled. "What do you think after the incident?" Lian Wanli said, "What if we both die?" Yixian said softly, "Then it's a draw." Lian Wanli thought about it and said, "Sure." Yixian looked up at the sky. The star web was still there. After a moment of silence, Yixian suddenly smiled. "I don't like to sit around and wait for death." As he spoke, he looked at Lian Wanli. "Do something?" The corners of Lian Wanli's mouth curled up slightly. "That's exactly what I want." Yixian suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky, and Lian Wanli followed closely behind. It didn't take long for Yixian to arrive before the star web. Meanwhile, an old man appeared in front of Yixian. This person was the divine mage Yansheng. Yansheng stared at Yixian and was about to speak when his expression changed drastically. In the next moment he pressed his hands together, and a powerful flame swept out from his body. At the same time he forcefully dodged to the side. An instant later, Yansheng appeared 300 m to the right. However, his arms were gone. Moreover, they were falling slowly to the ground where he stood just now. Yansheng stared fixedly at Yixian with a trace of fear in his eyes. In that instant just now he'd instinctively sensed danger. However, he hadn't seen how Yixian had attacked. Moreover, he hadn't seen how the sword had vanished as well. That sword was like a ghost. If he'd been just a little slower, even just a little, then he would have lost his life. Yansheng gazed at Yixian with extreme terror in his heart. When did Yixian's strength become so terrifying? Yixian gazed at Yansheng. The latter's expression changed and he moved 300 m back once more. Yixian said in his heart, "What a pity." Just now he'd intended to take Yansheng by surprise. Unfortunately, Yansheng was too strong and reacted too quickly. Even if he'd suddenly attacked, Yansheng was actually able to react in time. Fortunately, chopping off Yansheng's arms was still a gain. As Yixian walked towards Yansheng, two red-robed old men suddenly appeared behind the latter. Two divine wizards. Yixian stopped and said, "Don't be like this. Let's fight one-on-one." Yansheng gazed at Yixian. "Yixian, I have to say that you've indeed given the old man a huge surprise. However, you don't know that the more monstrous you are, the more we won't let you off." Yixian shook his head. "Would you let me off if I wasn't a monstrous genius? Don't talk nonsense." As he spoke, he pointed his sword at the old man. "One-on-one. If you're a man, let's fight one-on-one." Yansheng sneered. "One-on-one? You're so naive. Kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, the two behind him formed seals with their hands and started to chant incantations. Right at this moment, two swords suddenly appeared before them. One of the swords was white and the other black, and they appeared without any warning. The expressions of the two divine wizards changed drastically. At this moment they didn't even have time to chant any incantations, and they turned around and flashed. Meanwhile Yi Xian and Lian Wanli suddenly vanished on the spot. Nearby, Yan Sheng's expression changed drastically because Yi Xian was coming for him. Without any hesitation Yan Sheng stomped his right foot lightly. Yan Sheng vanished on the spot, and when he reappeared he was already behind the star web. However, at this moment Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed at the other divine wizard. The divine wizard formed hand seals with both hands and was just about to chant an incantation when two swords silently appeared in front of him again and slashed down at him. The divine wizard's expression changed drastically, and he didn't dare to continue chanting an incantation. He immediately flashed and retreated. However, the two swords were like maggots on a bone, and they chased after him closely. They were even faster than him, and he didn't have time to chant an incantation. At this moment the divine wizard was horrified. The main reason was that Yi Xian's swords were too fast, and he would be pierced through the chest if he was the slightest bit careless. Therefore he couldn't use any secret techniques at all. With this retreat, the divine wizard retreated into the star web. However, as soon as he retreated into the star web, a miserable scream resounded from outside the star web. Yan Sheng and the divine wizard turned to look outside, and they saw a bloody head slowly falling from the sky. Yan Sheng and the divine wizard's expressions instantly turned extremely ugly when they saw this scene. At this moment, they realized that Yi Xian's real target wasn't them, but the other divine wizard that was being held back by Lian Wanli. Yi Xian and Lian Wanli had actually killed the divine wizard in an instant. In the distance, beside Yi Xian, Lian Wanli glanced at the falling head below. If they can't use their secret techniques, so weak. Yi Xian nodded slightly. At this moment he also realized that although these divine wizards were very powerful, they also had a fatal weakness, and that was that they couldn't get close to them. To be more precise, as long as they weren't allowed to cast spells, they were as weak as chickens. However, the prerequisite was that the flying swords had to be fast enough to prevent these people from using their secret techniques. Once these people used their secret techniques, it would really be a little too destructive. Yi Xian walked in front of the star web and looked at Yan Sheng and the others. "Didn't you want that treasure? Come out." Yan Sheng looked at Yi Xian. "You're very arrogant." Yi Xian grinned. "I'm arrogant, come out and hit me." Lian Wanli, Yan Sheng stared at Yi Xian. "Come in." Yi Xian said, "Come out." Yan Sheng said calmly, "Aren't you very powerful? Come in." Yi Xian shook his head with a smile and turned to leave. However, when he turned around he suddenly coughed violently. Not only that, but he also bent his waist, but he quickly straightened it. Seeing this scene, Yan Sheng frowned slightly. The next moment he seemed to think of something and hurriedly said, "Stop him, he's suffering from a backlash." Behind Yan Sheng, the divine wizard hurriedly rushed out. However, as soon as he came out of the star web, two swords silently appeared behind him. At the same time, an azure dragon saber appeared in front of him. The god mage's eyes were wide open, filled with sorrow and despair. He knew that he was finished, because he realized that Yi Xian had long planned this. This time not only was he caught off guard, but he was also tricked by Yi Xian. An instant later, the divine wizard who had just come out was directly beheaded. Yan Sheng, who was about to come out, froze in place. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly clutched his stomach. "Ouch, I'm suffering from a backlash. I'm suffering from a backlash, come and hit me." Yan Sheng. Chapter 488. Lian Wanli glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head. "You're asking for a beating." Yi Xian laughed, then turned to look at Yan Sheng, whose expression was extremely ugly. "The strongest of the foreign domain? Just so. Ah." After saying that, he turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Lian Wanli glanced at Yan Sheng and said apologetically, "Sorry, he's a straightforward person and likes to speak the truth. Please don't mind him." After saying that, she turned and floated away. Yan Sheng suddenly roared, his whole body trembling with anger. At this moment his expression suddenly changed. The next moment he suddenly detonated his body. Boom. Yan Sheng's body collapsed, but his soul had already appeared hundreds of feet away. And there stood a person where Yan Sheng had been standing. This person was Yi Xian, who had previously left. Yi Xian looked up at Yan Sheng, who was not far away. Yan Sheng looked at Yi Xian in horror. How could you pass through the star web without a sound?" At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into the soul-suppressing sword. The next moment he held the sword and pointed at Yan Sheng. Soul separation. As soon as he said that, Yan Sheng in the distance was instantly horrified. He frantically retreated, but in the process of retreating, his soul actually disintegrated bit by bit. Yansheng looked at Yi Xian in horror. You! Yi Xian waved his sword, and Yansheng's soul immediately turned into a black light and was absorbed by Little Soul. After a moment, Little Soul's excited voice sounded. What a powerful soul! Young lord, I want more. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. You want more? What do you think this is? A cabbage? Little Soul said excitedly, Young lord, this is a great supplement. After I devour it, I can quickly recover. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If there's a chance, I'll definitely let you absorb more. Little Soul hurriedly said, Thank you, young lord. I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords and go into a sea of flames for young lord, even if I die 10,000 times. Yi Xian's expression froze. After a long time he shook his head, So you're like this, Little Soul? Xiaohun. Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly looked up and saw a middle-aged man standing not far away. Celestial Venerable. The painter who had fought against endless heaven. Without any hesitation Yi Xian used the Space Dao Law to retreat out of Star Web. The Empyrean looked at Yi Xian, You really surprise me. Needless to say, Yi Xian killing 3 divine mages by himself was a bit too exaggerated. Of course, this was an exaggeration. If Yansheng hadn't underestimated Yi Xian in the beginning and hadn't guarded against Yi Xian wouldn't have been able to cut off Yansheng's arms in an instant. With 3 divine wizards working together, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to resist them at all. However, these 3 people were defeated by Yi Xian one by one. Yi Xian took one look at the Empyrean, then turned to leave. However, to his surprise, the Empyrean had no intention of attacking at all. Not long after Yi Xian left, a woman appeared where Yi Xian had been standing. The newcomer was none other than Endless Sky. The Empyrean looked at Endless Heaven. Palace Master Endless, you don't know who you're fighting. Endless Heaven said calmly, and then? The Empyrean smiled slightly, then turned to leave. Endless Heaven glanced at the starry sky behind Star Web. In the depths of the starry sky, she could vaguely see teleportation arrays. Teleportation arrays. She knew very well what this meant. A moment later, Endless Heaven turned to leave. Burial Sky Great Wall. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. In a stone house, the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield powerhouses were all there. Yi Xian and Emosia were there as well. Inside the stone house, Wei Yang Tian said softly, I've already received news that there are 9 star fields, 12 saint-rank mercenary groups, 26 special sorcerers, 72 saint-rank knights, and 19 saint-rank demonic beasts participating in the encirclement. The hunchbacked old man's face gradually darkened when he heard that. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Saint-rank mercenary groups? Endless Heaven looked at Yi Xian. In the starry sky, there are some forces formed by people that specialize in killing and robbing people. A mercenary group that can reach the saint rank means that they have at least one creation realm powerhouse, and the rest are at least at the saint rank. As for the mutant sorcerers, they belong to the same sect as the god sorcerers. However, these mutant sorcerers like to play dirty, and their methods are slightly different. Speaking up to this point, she paused for a moment and continued, These saint knights should have been trained by the Keeper of Order. Every single one of them is a peak saint knight. Moreover, their combat strength is extremely strong, the kind that doesn't need to be exaggerated. Hearing that, everyone suddenly quieted down. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and said softly, Do we have any other choice? Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, For us, we have no other choice. So what we can do is to fight to the death. As for the others, we are going to die anyway, but before we die we must drag down as many scapegoats as possible. Everyone looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian said again, There is no other choice. Isn't that right? Endless Heaven nodded slightly. For us there is no other choice now. If we win this battle everyone will live, but if we die. At this point she looked at Yi Xian. Then as she said, Drag more scapegoats with us. The hunchbacked old man nodded. Fight. Fight to the last person. Fight. In the entire stone house, no one said anything about surrendering or negotiating, because this was simply impossible. Yi Xian left the stone house. At this moment, Emosia followed him out. The two of them walked down the Great Wall. Emosia said, You can already control that sword? Yi Xian nodded. Emosia smiled lightly. As expected, it is still suitable for you. Yi Xian said softly, Thank you. Emosia looked up at the starry sky. Do you think we will win? Yi Xian smiled and said, No. Emosia looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, The more afraid we are of losing, the more likely we will lose. The more afraid we are of dying, the more likely we will die. Emosia smiled slightly. Indeed. Put yourself in a desperate situation and you will be reborn. Yixian stopped and said softly, put yourself in a desperate situation and you will be reborn. Emosia glanced at Yixian. I hope everyone can survive. After saying this, he turned around and left. Staying where he was, Yixian kept walking forward after a moment of silence. What? Who didn't want to live? Yixian also wanted to live. But at this moment he could feel how powerful the enemy was. Not only the enemy outside but also the 5th floor of the prison pagoda. Prison pagoda. This pagoda brought him an opportunity, but at the same time, it was also a great disaster. As the plain-dressed woman said, possessing this prison pagoda was a blessing and a curse to him. The plain-dressed woman. At this moment Yixian thought of the plain-dressed woman. That woman was so strong that she was unreasonable. The appointment in the clouds. When the plain-dressed woman disappeared for the last time, she made a promise with him to meet in the clouds. This chapter is not finished, please continue. Actually, he also wanted to see her. Was there still a chance? Yixian looked up at the horizon. He was at a loss. Time passed bit by bit. At the end of the night, a smear of white appeared on the horizon. Soon, a red sun appeared on the horizon. At this moment, the star web covering the Great Wall suddenly disappeared. A man appeared in the sky above the Great Wall. The Celestial Venerable. The Celestial Venerable looked down. Anyone from the never-ending Starfield or the Moke clan will be spared if they surrender. Spared if they surrender. With the help of mystic energy, this sentence quickly spread throughout the Great Wall. At this moment, Wei Yang Tian appeared in front of the Celestial Venerable. Wei Yang Tian looked at the Celestial Venerable. Don't waste your breath. The Celestial Venerable sneered. Wei Yang Tian, since you want to die, we will fulfill your wish. As soon as he finished speaking, 72 powerhouses on black flaming horses suddenly swooped down. The people on these flaming horses were all sage powerhouses. Sage knights. 72 people swooped down. Their might was like that of a magnificent army with thousands of horses and men. Everyone felt a strong sense of oppression. Wei Yang Tian suddenly said, Wei Yang Guards. As soon as he finished speaking, 16 Wei Yang Guards, led by a Gui, suddenly appeared behind him. At this moment, the hunchbacked elder suddenly said, General Mo Ku. As soon as he finished speaking, 9 General Mo Ku appeared behind the hunchbacked elder. Wei Yang Tian said softly, Kill. With a sickle in hand, a Gui led the 16 Wei Yang guards into the sky. The 9 General Mo Ku of the Moke clan also charged out. 25 people against 72 people. In terms of momentum, the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan did not lose to the 72 Sage Knights at all. The Celestial Venerable glanced at the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku. He had to admit that these people were very strong. However, could 20 people really fight against 72 people? As soon as the battle began, the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku were suppressed. The Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku were very strong because they were experts carefully nurtured by the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan. However, these Sage Knights were not weak either, especially when it came to numbers. Therefore, as soon as the two sides clashed, the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku of the Moke clan were suppressed. Seeing this, the Celestial Venerable smiled. He looked at Wei Yang Tian. Attack. As soon as he said that, a group of people suddenly charged down from the sky. There were not many people, only about 40 to 50. These people all charged down in groups. They were obviously the Sage Realm Mercenary Corps. And these people were all sages. At this moment, Sage Realm experts were walking around like dogs. Although there were so many sages this time, it did not mean that sages were cabbages. On the contrary, sages were still very rare in this starfield. There were so many of them here because the Keeper of Order had basically gathered all the sages here. If they were scattered, each starfield would at most have 10 to 20 sages. Below, Wei Yang Tian looked at Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai nodded slightly. Soon he led Li Zhangfeng and the others into the sky, heading straight for the Mercenary Corps. The current head of the Moke clan, Mo Kuchi, also led a few desolate clan experts and charged out. In the sky, the Celestial Venerable looked down and saw Emosia, Zuoqing and the others. However, he did not see Yixian. He frowned and scanned the area below. He still did not see Yixian. As if remembering something, the Celestial Venerable's expression changed. Yixian is gone. He's going to set us up. P.S. My gums have been inflamed recently. It's painful. End of this chapter. Chapter 489. As soon as the heavenly venerable finished speaking, two rays of sword light slashed through the mercenary group a few thousand meters away. It was extremely fast. Two of the Saint Realm experts didn't even have time to react before their heads flew into the air. At practically the exact same moment, another two heads flew into the air over 30 meters away. The heavenly exalt's face fell when he saw this, and he was about to make a move. However, never-ending heaven suddenly made a move. Boom. An explosion resounded, and the heavenly venerable instantly retreated 300 meters. By the time he stopped, more than a dozen of the mercenaries had died. All of them had been instantly killed. Moreover, more were dying incessantly. The heavenly venerable turned to look at the starry sky. Attack. As soon as he finished speaking, an afterimage shot down from the sky. In the dark below, Yi Xian, who was about to launch an attack, frowned slightly. Then he stepped back. As soon as he stepped back, the space where he had been suddenly exploded. Yi Xian looked in front of him. A man in black had suddenly appeared there, and the man held a dagger in his hand. He could sense that the man in black was looking at him. The man in black was able to notice him. Right at this moment, the man in black suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Wuxia suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Wuxia punched forward. Rumble. The man in black returned to where he was before. Wuxia said, "Continue. I'll deal with him." As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot lightly. Boom. Space trembled slightly, and he vanished on the spot. The man in black held the dagger tightly in his right hand, and his body gradually turned illusory. In the next moment, numerous afterimages flashed towards Wuxia from all directions. Seeing this scene, Wuxia narrowed his eyes. In the next moment he suddenly slammed his palm in front of him. Rumble. The space within 100 meters suddenly shook violently. Immediately after, a powerful force spread outwards with Wuxia at the center. At the same time, a black figure was forced back by this force. It was the man in black. The man in black suddenly stomped his right foot and used the power of space to stop himself. However, he just stopped when two swords appeared soundlessly. The swords pierced through the man's head. Blood splattered everywhere. Wuxia turned her head and looked around, but she didn't see Yi Xian. But right at this moment, a series of screams rang out incessantly from the mercenary group on the right. Instant kill. The group of mercenaries fighting with Mr. Bai and the others could be said to be frightened out of their wits at this moment because they did not discover who was secretly attacking them. The two flying swords were really too elusive. There was nowhere to hide. Soon, the group of mercenaries retreated as they fought. Not only did they have to face Mr. Bai and the other powerhouses, but they also had to guard against the people who attacked them from the shadows. The people who attacked them from the shadows took up too much of their energy. Many people already had thoughts of retreating. At this time, the heavenly venerate fighting never-ending heaven suddenly looked up into the depths of the starry sky and roared, "What are you waiting for?" In the starry sky, a purple-robed old man looked down. The purple-robed old man was expressionless, and behind him was a dense black army. After a short moment, the purple-robed old man said softly, "Kill." With that, countless soldiers swooped down from the starry sky. Among this army there were human powerhouses, demonic beasts and some oceanic species great demons. Their numbers were several times that of the Moke clan and never-ending star field. As he charged down, the sky darkened in an instant. In the sky below, Wuxia looked up at the dense black army and said softly, "All members of the Moke clan listen up. Fight to the last man." With that, he directly leaped onto the evil Qilin's back and the next moment he rode the evil Qilin and soared into the sky. Behind him were countless Moke clan powerhouses. Fight. Countless angry roars soared into the sky, shaking the horizon. On the other side, Shui Bai held a long spear in his hand and looked up at the horizon. The next moment he pointed his spear at the horizon. Fight. With that, Shui Bai and Zhou Xingxing soared into the sky, and behind them, countless never-ending star-field powerhouses followed closely. Fight. No one had the slightest bit of fear. They could only fight. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man looked down. Among the mercenary groups, powerhouses were still being killed instantly. The purple-robed old man turned to look beside him. "Can we restrain him?" With that, 3 old men appeared beside the purple-robed old man. The 3 old men all wore gray robes and held black staffs in their hands. Divergent sorcerers. The 3 of them looked down. After a moment, the leading divergent sorcerer said softly, "Give us some time." The purple-robed old man nodded. Soon, the 3 divergent sorcerers began chanting incantations. Gradually, the space around them began to tremble. At the same time, three mysterious forces followed the space and spread downwards. The purple-robed old man looked down, his eyes searching for one person. That was the painter. But he hadn't seen this painter yet. This painter was as terrifying as Wei Yang Tian. After a moment of silence, the purple-robed old man suddenly said, "Attack." With that, 6 powerhouses appeared behind him. These 6 people were very different from humans. They were much taller than humans. Demon Lord. The 6 of them were all Creation Realm powerhouses, and they were all at the peak of the Creation Realm. In the next moment, the 6 of them charged downwards. Below, Wei Yang Tian suddenly looked up into the sky. When she saw the 6 of them, she frowned slightly. Who would stop them? At this moment, a woman appeared before the 6 of them. Painter. The painter stared coldly at the 6 of them. The 6 of them charged towards the painter. 6 against 1. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man relaxed when he saw the painter appear. It was fine as long as the painter appeared. He turned to look at the 3 divergent sorcerers. At this moment, the leading divergent sorcerer suddenly made a seal downwards. Void seal appear. As soon as the voice fell, the space below suddenly trembled violently. Yi Xian, who was in the dark, suddenly had a drastic change of expression. He hurriedly retreated, and the space he was retreating to suddenly ignited. After a moment, Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, in the space above his head, there was a black flame floating. That flame was right above his head. At this moment, although he was still in the space, that flame was following him. The current him was no different from not hiding at all. Yi Xian raised his head. In the sky, the 3 divergent sorcerers were watching him. Beside the 3 divergent sorcerers, the purple-robed old man suddenly said, "Kill him." The leading divergent sorcerer took out a black mirror and began to silently chant, "Heaven and Earth Mysterious Technique, Universe Reconstruction, Seal." With that, he pointed his finger at Yi Xian. Below, the space around Yi Xian suddenly froze and began to search layer by layer. Seeing this, the purple-robed old man's expression changed. "Don't use spatial techniques." As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Yi Xian went back to normal. Seeing this scene, the 3 of them immediately frowned. They looked at the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man said in a deep voice, "Spatial techniques are useless against this guy. Change to a secret technique." The leading old man nodded. He looked at Yi Xian and quickly made a gesture with both hands. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian began to heat up. In the starry sky, the divergent sorcerer formed a seal with both hands and silently chanted, "Heaven and Earth Mysterious Technique, 4 Symbols Secret Technique, Absolute Blaze." As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Yi Xian suddenly ignited. Yi Xian slashed with his sword. A ray of light flashed, but it was directly incinerated by the flames. At the same time, Yi Xian noticed that his body seemed to be on fire. Yi Xian frowned slightly. These geezers have some ability. He didn't dare be careless. The sword in his hand transformed into the sword of Moke. In the next moment, a powerful force converged towards his body like a tide. Moke energy. A short moment later, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot with his sword in hand. A ray of light flashed, and everywhere it passed, it tore through everything. Even the flames were torn apart. After charging out of the flames, Yi Xian didn't deal with the 3 divergent sorcerers, because he knew that he couldn't get close to them at such a distance. Moreover, there was a purple-robed old man by their side. So, he was very clearly aware that he couldn't get close to the 3 divergent sorcerers. So, his objective right now was to help Ague and the others deal with the Saint Realm Knights. Because Ague and the others were being steadily pushed back. The expression of the old man changed when he saw Yi Xian charge towards the Saint Realm Knights. His figure shook and he shot through space to arrive in front of Yi Xian. After that, he suddenly clawed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian instantly felt a powerful force shrouding him as soon as the palm touched him. This force was so oppressive that he could hardly breathe. Yi Xian naturally didn't dare act carelessly when facing the old man, and he immediately took his sword in both hands and slashed it forward. A single strike of his sword was enhanced by 2 types of sword intent. Bang! As the sword slashed down, Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, the purple-robed old man in front of him was also forced to retreat over 100 feet. The old man glanced at his right hand. At this moment, his right arm had split apart like a spider web. The old man's face fell, and there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes as he gazed at Yi Xian. "What sort of monstrous genius are you?" At this moment, he was extremely astounded because he hadn't expected that he would actually be injured by a junior. That attack from Yi Xian had almost destroyed his entire arm. But Yi Xian wasn't even at the saint realm. He was too monstrous. The old man's eyes gradually turned icy cold as he gazed at Yi Xian, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all. In the distance, Yi Xian could feel the murderous intent of the purple-robed elder. He gripped the moke sword tightly in his right hand. Facing this purple-robed elder, he did not dare to be careless. One careless move could cost him his life. Right at this moment, the violet-robed old man suddenly vanished. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly. In the next moment, he took a stride forward, and then he held his sword with both hands before he suddenly slashed down from above. Bang! As his sword slashed down, Yi Xian instantly felt a powerful force spread through his entire body, and then he was blasted flying. However, the purple-robed old man did not care about his arm that had been completely torn apart. He charged forward and punched Yi Xian, who was sent flying. If this punch landed, Yi Xian would definitely become a pile of mush. Chapter 490. Right when this fist was about to smash onto Yi Xian, a spear suddenly tore through the sky and arrived before him. Bang! The violet-robed old man retreated by over 30 m. The violet-robed old man raised his head to look over, and he saw a white-clothed woman that held a spear in her hand standing before Yi Xian. This person was precisely Enlancio. Enlancio held a spear in her hand as she just looked at the violet-robed old man without a trace of fear in her eyes. The violet-robed old man stared fixedly at Enlancio. "Who are you?" Enlancio didn't speak and she just looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth. "What are you doing here?" Enlancio looked at Yi Xian. "Am I not welcome?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course I am." Enlancio was just about to say something when the violet-robed old man suddenly roared furiously. "Die for the old man." As soon as his voice resounded, he pressed his left hand forward. With this press, an enormous energy palm suddenly flashed out from space, and it shot straight towards Yi Xian and Enlancio. Enlancio's wrist spun, and her spear stabbed out. This spear directly stabbed onto the enormous energy palm. However, the formidable force of the attack really did force Enlancio to retreat repeatedly. But right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed his sword at the enormous energy palm. Bang! The enormous energy palm exploded into pieces. However, Yi Xian's expression changed instead because the violet-robed old man had already appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Enlancio's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. "Retreat." Yi Xian didn't hesitate to retreat, and he just retreated when a spear suddenly stabbed straight down towards the top of Yi Xian's head, and a strand of light flickered on the tip of the spear. The violet-robed old man's expression changed, and he didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian, and he smashed out with his left fist. Bang! Enlancio retreated over 30 m with her spear, but at practically the exact same moment, two flying swords appeared before the violet-robed old man and slashed straight at his throat. The violet-robed old man's pupils constricted slightly, and he hurriedly dodged backwards. However, he just stopped when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Soul Fixation Sword. Moreover, at this moment, Yi Xian was holding the soul-suppressing sword in his hand. Facing this purple-robed elder, Yi Xian did not dare to use soul separation or soul fixation from a distance, because the other party was too strong, and he did not have the slightest confidence. Thus he chose close combat. The purple-robed old man had nowhere to hide. At this moment, the violet-robed old man had obviously sensed the uniqueness of this strike of Yi Xian's, and his expression instantly changed drastically. At this moment he was utterly unable to dodge because this strike of Yi Xian's was too ingenious and had grasped the perfect timing. So, he could only choose to take it head-on. There was no other choice. The purple-robed old man roared angrily and punched out with his left hand. This punch could be said to contain the power of his entire life. The space in front of him directly collapsed. Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom. Along with the sound of an explosion, Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, at the instant he was sent flying, his sword struck the purple-robed old man's arm. At this instant, the violet-robed old man was horrified. He didn't hesitate to detonate his body resolutely while his soul floated backwards. As he floated several thousand feet away. Enlancio was about to chase after them when the violet-robed elder suddenly roared, "Stop them!" 4 black-clothed men appeared in front of the purple-robed old man. Enlancio did not attack again. Instead, she turned around and returned to Yi Xian's side. Fresh blood flowed endlessly from the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. Enlancio lightly wiped the blood from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth, her expression gradually turning cold. Yi Xian stared into the distance. The purple-robed old man's soul was fading away, but a moment later the purple-robed old man's soul began to fade. But after a short moment the old man's soul returned to normal. He didn't die. Yi Xian's face sank. In the distance, the violet-robed old man raised his head to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, his eyes were filled with extreme fear. That sword strike from before had almost directly crushed him to death. If his soul wasn't sufficiently strong he would have died already. The violet-robed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian for a short moment, and then he turned around and returned to the starry sky. At this moment he didn't dare fight Yi Xian and Enlanxiu anymore. He was a soul body now, and Yi Xian's sword and sword techniques clearly countered soul bodies. If he were to continue attacking now he would have a slim chance of survival. After returning to the starry sky, the violet-robed old man said furiously, "Attack! Everyone attack!" As soon as his voice resounded, countless experts swooped down from the boundless starry sky. A dense expanse of darkness. At this moment the enforcers of order attacked with all their might, and they didn't hold back in the slightest. Below, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the dense expanse of darkness in the starry sky. His brows were knit together tightly, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Beside him, Enlanxiu said in a light voice, "Just do your best." Yi Xian nodded lightly, "Just do your best." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged into the sky with his sword in hand. Enlanxiu was behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian charged towards the group of saint-rank cavalrymen once more because Ague and the others were completely suppressed. If no one helped them then Ague and the others would die. Along with the addition of Yi Xian and Enlanxiu, Ague and the others instantly felt much more at ease. Especially since Yi Xian's flying sword was helping them from the shadows, and it could be said to be a great help. Even these saint-rank cavalrymen were unable to resist Yi Xian's flying sword. That flying sword was too swift. It was swift to the point even saint-rank experts couldn't dodge it. Moreover, Enlanxiu's strength was extremely formidable as well, and she directly crushed saint-rank experts. Especially when Enlanxiu and Yi Xian cooperated together, they could practically instantly annihilate any saint-rank expert. For a time, Ague and the others started to gradually gain the upper hand. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian and Enlanxiu below. His gaze was like a sword and it flickered with ghastly killing intent. Right at this moment Yi Xian, who was killing, suddenly turned his head, and in the next moment he directly vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light directly severed the head of an expert. And in front of this expert, a young man slowly fell from the sky. This person was War Army. At this moment, War Army only had one arm left. Yi Xian supported War Army. War Army's entire body was covered in scars, and his aura was growing weaker. When he saw Yi Xian, War Army grinned, and this grin instantly caused a copious amount of blood to gush out from his mouth. Yi Xian gently placed War Army on the ground. War Army looked up at the end of the horizon and softly said, "Brother Yi, I might have to leave first." Yi Xian shook his head, "There's still hope." With that said, he took out a pile of purple source crystals and placed them in War Army's arms. War Army gently shook his head, "The current me no longer has any combat strength. If I live, I will only be a burden to my brothers. To me, death is a kind of release." Yi Xian said angrily, "What the f***ck are you saying? What do you mean by you will only be a burden to your brothers if you live?" War Army softly said, "Brother Yi, let me die." He naturally wanted to live, but at this moment he was very clear that he would only be a burden to others if he lived. Because the current him no longer had any combat strength, and if these brothers around him came to protect him, they would be implicated by him. He wanted to live, but he didn't want to implicate these brothers around him even more. Yi Xian gently placing War Army on the ground, he held War Army's shoulders tightly with both hands. "Listen, live well, live for me." With that said, he suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. In front of him, an expert was directly cut in half by his sword, but soon more and more experts rushed towards him and War Army. Looking at those experts rushing over, Yi Xian's expression gradually became ferocious. When those people rushed in front of him, he suddenly waved his hands. Buzz. Two swords suddenly rang out and then two swords suddenly flew out. For a moment in front of Yi Xian, dozens of people's heads almost moved at the same time. But the next moment more people rushed over. War Army looked at Yi Xian with a somewhat complicated expression. "Brother Yi?" Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, "Shut up, hurry up and heal your wounds." With that said, he held his sword and slashed diagonally. A sword aura shot out, and in an instant dozens of people on the right were directly killed. However, more and more experts appeared in the sky, and at that moment, whether it was the Moke clan or the never-ending Starfield, more and more people were dying. Never-ending Starfield's Moke clan was completely suppressed. At that moment, in the void in the sky, Moke clan's Emosia suddenly turned around. Not far away, Zhuqing's chest was pierced by a sword, and one of the foreign experts slashed at Zhuqing's head. Zhuqing slowly closed his eyes. He was already exhausted. This was not a one-on-one fight. He had killed at least hundreds of experts by himself, and at that moment he was really exhausted. Seeing Zhuqing's situation, Emosia's expression changed drastically. He was about to help, but at that moment, dozens of experts directly surrounded him. Emosia's expression instantly became ferocious. He pointed a finger at his chest, and a powerful aura swept out from his body. Rumble. The surrounding experts all retreated from the impact. Emosia looked at Zhuqing's position. Zhuqing's head did not fly off, but was slowly dragged down by a sword. Emosia turned his head to the right where Yixian was. At that moment, Yixian was facing off against almost 100 experts by himself. Emosia looked at the falling Zhuqing. Zhuqing glanced at Emosia and smiled slightly. "I'll go first." With that, he looked at the countless experts rushing towards him. "Mo clan. Fight to the death." With that, he placed his palm on his abdomen. Emosia's expression changed drastically. "No." He rushed towards Zhuqing, but a powerful force suddenly exploded from Zhuqing's body. Almost in an instant, almost 100 experts around him were directly turned into ashes. Seeing this scene, Emosia was stunned. On the other side, Yixian was also stunned. After a moment of silence, Emosia suddenly looked up at the sky. The next moment, he clenched his fists and smashed them in front of him. Rumble. With Emosia as the center, the space within a few hundred meters suddenly shook violently and cracked. Powerful dark energy surged out from the surroundings. In an instant, countless screams rang out from the surroundings. Emosia raised his head and roared, "All members of the Moke clan, listen to my order. Kill. At all costs." With that, he rushed into the sky. Wherever he passed, heads flew out one after another. On the other side, Yixian turned his head to look at War Army. War Army's right hand slowly clenched. Yixian said angrily, "Don't do stupid things." War Army said softly, "I don't want to drag you down." With that, he slammed his palm towards his abdomen. At the same time, a powerful force was gathering in his abdomen. Chapter 491. Self-destruct. Seeing this scene, Yixian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly slashed with his sword. A wave of sword gleams surged out, and the dozen people in front of Yixian were directly killed by the sword gleam. Meanwhile, Yixian turned and rushed toward the War Army. The War Army looked at Yixian in front of him and grinned. "Brother, take care." With that said, he slowly closed his eyes. At that moment, a hand suddenly pressed down on the War Army's shoulder. In an instant, the powerful force in the War Army's body was directly suppressed. The War Army opened his eyes. In front of him stood a black-robed man, and behind this black-robed man were 9 men in black robes. These 9 people's faces could not be seen clearly. The War Army was a little puzzled. "You are." The reason why he was puzzled was because he had never seen these people before. The black-robed man did not answer the War Army. He turned to look at Yixian, and at that moment Yixian was already in front of him. Yixian looked at the black-robed man. "You are." The black-robed man said, "Young Master Yi, we are here to help you. As for anything else, we can't tell you for the time being." Yixian was silent for a moment, then said, "Thank you very much." The black-robed man looked up at the void in the sky and said softly, "Young Master Yi, are you willing to leave with us?" Yixian frowned slightly. "Leave?" The black-robed man nodded. "Young Master Yi, to be honest, this time the Keeper of Order is serious. With the current strength of the Moke clan and the never-ending Star Sector, it is impossible to stop them." As he said that, he looked at Yixian. "You will only die in vain if you stay here." Yixian turned to look at the sky, which was filled with a dense army. It could be said that the defeat of the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan was only a matter of time. Yixian said softly, "I, Yixian, appreciate everyone's good intentions." The black-robed man said solemnly, "Young Master Yi, you have no chance of winning." Yixian said, "It's precisely because there's no chance of winning that I can't leave." As he spoke, he looked towards the sky and said in a light voice, "If others don't betray me, I won't betray them." The black-robed man sighed softly. In fact, he had already expected this. Yixian looked at the black-robed men and said, "Everyone, I don't know who you are, but please don't get involved in this matter." The black-robed man smiled and said, "We came here to help." With that he waved his right hand. Behind the black-robed man, 9 people suddenly soared into the sky. 9 Sage Peak experts. Moreover, they weren't ordinary Sage Peak experts. They were very strong. Yi Xian looked at the black-robed man and the black-robed man smiled and said, "I know young Master Yi has questions. If we win, I will tell young Master Yi. If we lose, everything will be meaningless." Yi Xian nodded and said, "No matter what, thank you." The black-robed man said, "Let's talk later." With that, he turned and soared into the sky, directly rushing towards a rebirth realm expert. Yi Xian turned and looked at the war army. War army was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly grabbed him and brought him into the great wall of burial skies. Yi Xian placed the war army on the ground and said, "Heal well. If we all die before you recover, you can self-destruct. If we don't die, then come out and help." With that, he turned and disappeared not far away. In the same place, the war army was silent for a moment before he began to devour purple origin crystals. What he needed to do now was to quickly heal. Outside the great wall of burial skies, Yi Xian stood in the sky. At this moment there were screams everywhere in the starry sky. People were dying at every moment. Although the black-robed man and the others had joined in, it was not very useful. At this time a certain part of space suddenly exploded. A woman walked out. This person was precisely Master Painter. When he saw the painter, the purple-robed old man's face instantly darkened. The painter looked up at the starry sky and finally, her gaze landed on the purple-robed old man. The latter's expression instantly changed. At this moment, the painter suddenly disappeared and when she reappeared, she was already in the starry sky. The purple-robed old man was shocked. "Stop her." Dozens of experts directly rushed towards the painter. However, in less than a breath's time, these dozens of people had their heads removed. At the same time, the painter had already appeared in front of the purple-robed old man. Just as the painter was about to attack, an afterimage suddenly swept towards her. The painter frowned and raised her hand to press down. Boom! A wave of energy suddenly erupted from the painter's palm, but it was quickly extinguished. The painter was forced back nearly 100 steps. And at this time, in front of the purple-robed old man stood a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man wore a black overcoat and had a sheathed saber at his waist. The painter looked at the middle-aged man. The latter's right hand grasped the saber hilt. After a moment of silence, he suddenly drew the saber. A saber light erupted from the sheath, as dazzling as the sun. In the distance, the painter's jade-like hand gently pressed forward. The space in front of her palm began to rapidly condense. At this time the saber light arrived. Bang! The space in front of the painter began to violently tremble. Then cracks began to appear. In less than a breath of time, the space for 10,000 feet around the painter had cracked into a spiderweb. The painter's right hand suddenly clenched into a fist. She lightly pressed forward, "Break!" As her words fell, bang! The space in front of the painter began to collapse inch by inch. A formidable strength spread out like a tsunami towards the blade-wielding man. Across from the painter, the blade-wielding man was expressionless. His eyes were closed, his right hand gripping the saber hilt. After a moment of silence, he stepped forward, his right hand drawing the saber and slashing down. His movements were completed in a single breath. A wisp of saber aura tore through the air. Wherever the saber aura passed, it tore through everything. Even the painter's strength was torn apart. The space in front of the two was like a piece of cloth, while the saber aura was like a sharp scissor. Soon the saber aura tore through the space and arrived in front of the painter. The painter's hands came together. This closed in on the saber aura. After a moment of silence, the painter suddenly pressed down. The saber aura instantly disappeared. However, at this moment, a saber slashed down from the painter's head. The painter suddenly disappeared. Just like that, the two began to fight. Both sides could be said to be evenly matched. Below, Yi Xian looked up at the purple-robed elder in the starry sky. At this moment, the purple-robed elder was also looking at him. The purple-robed elder did not attack. All he had to do now was wait because they already had the upper hand. It was only a matter of time before the Moke clan and Never-Ending Star region were defeated. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly looked at the distant Emosia. At this moment, Emosia was crazily slaughtering. Suddenly Yi Xian said, "Emosia, help me. I'll kill that old bastard." After saying that, he transformed into a sword aura and soared into the sky. 1,000 feet away, Moxie, who was in the midst of a massacre, turned his head to look at Yixian's position. In the next moment, his body trembled, and he directly turned into a black shadow that chased after Yixian. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye he arrived beside Yixian. Yixian said, "Help me stop the others." Moxie did not speak. He only stared at the purple-robed elder in the starry sky. In the starry sky, seeing Yixian and Moxie rush over, the purple-robed elder's expression instantly changed. He knew how terrifying Yixian and Moxie were. Although they were both young, they were monstrous among monstrous geniuses. If the two of them worked together, killing a creation realm expert would be a very simple matter. The purple-robed elder hastily shouted, "Stop them! Stop them for me!" As soon as he finished speaking, countless strong people around dashed towards Yixian and Moxie. More than a dozen of them were killed by the two flying swords before they could even get close to Yixian and Moxie. When the rest of the people came into contact with Yixian and Moxie, Moxie's speed suddenly exploded. He directly rushed into the crowd and punched forward with both fists. Rumble. In the starry sky, an explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. More than a dozen experts were crushed on the spot. Meanwhile, Yixian relied on the two flying swords to forcefully rush in front of the purple-robed elder. However, at this moment, the purple-robed elder's mouth suddenly curled up. His smile was a little strange. Sensing this scene, Yixian's expression changed greatly. At this moment he could no longer hold back. He suddenly slashed down with his sword. The sword was the soul-suppressing sword. If this sword fell at such a close distance, the purple-robed elder would definitely die. This was because the purple-robed elder was currently a soul body. Just as Yixian's sword was about to fall, a blurry shadow suddenly appeared in front of Yixian. In the next moment, Yixian felt an aura of death. However, Yixian's expression was incomparably calm. That sword still fell down. Meanwhile, the blurry shadow retreated dozens of feet because a demonic beast had appeared beside Yixian. Second floor, Great God. At this moment, the purple-robed elder was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that the shadow would suddenly retreat. Even if he wanted to retreat now, it was too late. Yixian's sword slashed down. The purple-robed elder's soul instantly became illusory. Behind the purple-robed elder, Yixian coldly said, "I'll let you laugh." As his voice fell, he slashed back with his sword. The purple-robed elder's soul instantly began to dissipate. In front of Yixian, the shadow stared at the second floor Great God behind Yixian. "I think you must be the mysterious expert behind Yixian. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Chapter 492. The Second Floor Guru. Yixian did not expect the second floor guru to appear. Fortunately, the second floor guru suddenly appeared. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble just now because the middle-aged man in front of him was far stronger than him, Yixian. The middle-aged man did not care about Yixian at this moment, but stared at the second floor guru. In his opinion, the second floor guru in front of him was the most dangerous person. The second floor guru glanced around in silence. At this moment, 3 old men appeared around her. Yixian returned to the second floor guru's side. The second floor guru looked at the middle-aged man opposite her, who smiled and said, "How should I address you?" The second floor guru suddenly disappeared. In the distance, the middle-aged man's expression changed dramatically. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the middle-aged man was sent flying thousands of feet away. However, at this moment, the 3 old men around the second floor guru suddenly disappeared. The second floor guru slapped out. Boom! With the second floor guru as the center, the space within thousands of feet collapsed and was annihilated in an instant. In an instant, the space returned to normal, and the 3 old men had disappeared. Seeing this scene, Yixian was dumbfounded. He knew that the second floor guru was strong, but he did not expect her to be this strong. That was an instant kill. As for the 3 experts just now, they were all creation realm experts, but they were instantly killed just like that. In the distance, the middle-aged man also had a solemn expression. Obviously, the second floor guru's strength was beyond his expectations. The second floor guru slowly walked toward the middle-aged man. "Such a weak person, how dare you covet this treasure? Don't you have any idea in your heart?" As her voice fell, she suddenly disappeared. Then the space in front of the middle-aged man collapsed inch by inch. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man's pupils shrank slightly. The next moment he suddenly stomped his right foot and his whole body shot out. Boom! Not far in front of Yixian, a loud noise suddenly rang out, and the surrounding space trembled. Then Yixian saw a figure in the starry sky retreating rapidly. It was the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man retreated nearly thousands of feet away. Not only that, but one of his arms had disappeared. The middle-aged man raised his head to look at the god on the second floor. Just as he was about to speak, the god on the second floor suddenly disappeared. The middle-aged man's pupils shrank, and in the next moment, before he could react, his head was sent flying. At this time, second-floor god appeared behind the middle-aged man. At the side, Yixian was stunned. The strength of this second-floor guru? The great god on the second floor raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. There, a voice suddenly sounded, "How should I address you?" As the voice faded, an old man appeared in front of the Almighty on the second floor. The old man wore a long robe embroidered with gold. His beard was very long, reaching his chest. The old man glanced at Yixian, then his eyes fell on the great god on the second floor. The old man basically knows all the experts in this star field, but I've never seen or heard of you. The great god on the second floor did not speak. She suddenly disappeared. Not far away, the old man expressionlessly pointed a finger. Rumble. The surrounding space trembled, and the great god on the second floor returned to her original position. But the next moment, she suddenly disappeared. With a tearing sound, the old man retreated hundreds of feet away. In front of the old man, the great god on the second floor slammed her claw down. This claw slashed down, and the space was directly torn and shattered like paper. In front of the great god on the second floor, the old man suddenly clenched his right hand. Retreat. Voice, this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. As he fell, a black vortex suddenly appeared in front of him. Boom. After the great god on the second floor's claw fell, she instantly retreated hundreds of feet away. At this time, the old man suddenly took a step forward, and a powerful force instantly enveloped the great god on the second floor, but the next moment, this force directly collapsed. Soon, the great god on the second floor appeared in front of the old man, and at the same time, a tearing sound suddenly rang. Rumble. With this deafening vibration, the old man had retreated hundreds of feet away, and as soon as he stopped, two flying swords suddenly appeared in front of him. These two swords were extremely fast and the timing was even more perfect. However, as soon as the two flying swords appeared in front of the old man, they disappeared without a sound. In the distance, Yixian saw this scene and his face immediately darkened. The old man looked at Yixian. Among the younger generation, you are indeed not bad. As he spoke, he looked at the great god on the second floor. Your strength also surprised the old man, but if you want to protect the never-ending galaxy, the Moke clan, and this Yixian, I'm afraid that is not enough. As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly waved his right hand. With this, the space around the great god on the second floor suddenly undulated like a wave. The great god on the second floor looked at Yixian. Retreat. Without the slightest hesitation, Yixian immediately retreated thousands of feet away. As soon as he retreated, the space around the great god on the second floor shattered, and then a powerful force came from the starry sky. At this time, Yixian suddenly turned his head, and there, a figure slowly walked over. This person was Wei Yangtian. And in Wei Yangtian's hand was a bloody head. This head was the celestial venerable's head. We won. Yixian's heart relaxed. Wei Yangtian walked to Yixian's side and looked at the distant great god on the second floor. Your friend? Yixian nodded. Wei Yangtian looked at Yixian. Do you still have friends like this? Call more of them. Yixian. Wei Yangtian looked up into the distant starry sky and gradually her brows furrowed. Yixian said in a low voice, There are others? Wei Yangtian nodded. Yixian looked into the starry sky. What are they waiting for? Wei Yangtendo said, They probably won't wait any longer. As soon as Wei Yangtian finished speaking, she walked into the starry sky. As if remembering something, she turned to look at Yixian. You are now the master of the never-ending galaxy. As soon as she finished speaking, she flashed towards the starry sky. Yixian knew that Wei Yangtian had taken the initiative to look for the experts in the dark. A short moment later, Yixian suddenly turned around and transformed into a ray of light that shot down. It didn't take long for two flying swords to flash past incessantly. Instant kill. Yixian's two flying swords were so swift that even Sage Realm experts couldn't resist them. Yixian, Emosia, and Enlancio could be said to be unstoppable. After the three of them joined forces, the situation actually turned around slightly. Especially Yixian's flying swords. They could be said to be specialized in killing the top experts, and these people were utterly unable to resist them. Yixian's group of three understood that Wei Yangtian and the second floor's experts were busy, so they had to kill them as quickly as possible. The more they killed, the better. Just like this, under the combined efforts of Yi Xian, Wuxia, and Enlancio, the battle situation gradually turned around. This was because the mercenaries and Saint Realm Knights were already fighting while retreating. They weren't afraid of people like Wuxia and Enlancio who fought head-on, but they were afraid of people like Yi Xian who attacked from the shadows. However, due to the huge difference in numbers, the never-ending Star Zone and the Moke clan were still suppressed. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Right at this moment, a rumbling sound suddenly resounded from the depths of the distant starry sky. Yi Xian looked up and saw a figure rapidly retreating in the starry sky, directly retreating to the sky above the Great Wall of Heaven burial. This person was none other than Endless Heaven. Everyone's faces turned solemn when they saw this. In the starry sky, a huge human face quietly appeared. This face looked down, and in the next moment, a powerful force suddenly exploded in the starry sky. Rumble. The entire starry sky suddenly trembled violently as if it was on the verge of collapsing. Right at this moment, Master Painter, the great god on the second floor, and the hunchbacked old man from the Moke clan retreated repeatedly, and they retreated by almost 3 kilometers. On the other hand, the experts from the foreign territories and Sky River region had stopped fighting and retreated into the starry sky as well. The huge face looked down, and then its gaze stopped on the great god on the second floor in the end. A clone. A clone. The gazes of everyone in the surroundings shot towards the god on the second floor when they heard this, and their eyes carried a trace of shock. Even Yi Xian was slightly shocked at this moment. He hadn't expected that the great god on the second floor was actually just a clone. The great god on the second floor gazed at the huge face in the starry sky. Is there a problem? The face vanished silently and was replaced by an illusory middle-aged man. Countless people hurriedly bowed deeply to him when they saw this illusory middle-aged man. The Star Lord, the master of countless stellar regions and the master of the guardians of the starry sky. The Star Lord gazed at the great god on the second floor, and then he pressed his fingers together and pointed down. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. After a moment of silence, the great god on the second floor's figure instantly became illusory, and then she started to dissipate bit by bit. The great god on the second floor gazed at the Star Lord silently. Just like that, she gradually vanished until she vanished. Meanwhile, the Star Lord gazed at Wei Yangtian, Master Painter, and the others. Wei Yangtian's face was expressionless, and he didn't show any weakness as he met the Star Lord's gaze. The Star Lord spoke softly, "All of you aren't bad. Are you willing to follow me?" Follow. A wisp of ridicule curled up on the corners of Wei Yangtian's mouth when he heard the Star Lord, "Follow you?" The Star Lord shook his head. "Following me might be an opportunity for the 3 of you, an opportunity to rise to a higher level." Wei Yangtian looked the Star Lord in the eyes. "I'm sorry, but I don't have the habit of being someone's dog." The Star Lord nodded slightly. "I won't force it." As he spoke, he pressed his right hand down lightly. A powerful force smashed down towards Wei Yangtian and the others. Others couldn't sense this force, but only Wei Yangtian and the others could. When they felt this powerful force, Wei Yangtian and the others' expressions changed. What a terrifying force. Soon, the 3 of them were directly pressed down by this force, and before long, the ground below started to crumble and be annihilated inch by inch. In the starry sky, the middle-aged man's gaze landed on Yi Xian. He pressed his right hand down lightly, and with this pressure Yi Xian's body was directly fixed in place. In the next moment, an illusory Xiaota quietly appeared between his brows. Yi Xian's entire body instantly stiffened. The other party wanted to forcibly pull out the prison pagoda. Yi Xian felt his divine soul disappearing bit by bit, and his consciousness was also gradually blurring. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from within Yi Xian's body, "Sorry, this is mine." As the voice faded, boom. The prison pagoda between Yi Xian's brows instantly returned to Yi Xian's body, and at the same time footsteps sounded from the 5th floor. End of this chapter. Chapter 493. The 5th floor. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Is this guy coming out? In the field, everyone's eyes fell on Yi Xian. The Star Lord in the air also looked at Yi Xian and said softly, "It seems that you still have a backup plan." Yi Xian sneered, "I advise you to quickly kneel down and beg for mercy. Otherwise you will die without a burial place." The Star Lord shook his head and chuckled, "Die without a burial place? You've made the biggest joke in the history of this star field." As he said, he looked at Yi Xian's abdomen. "Let him come out." Come out. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Under everyone's gaze, an illusory Xiaota suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows. As this illusory Xiaota appeared, a man walked out from it. The man looked like he was only in his 30s. His long hair draped over his shoulders and there was a small emperor character between his eyebrows. His sleeves were very wide and his hands were hidden in the sleeves. His feet were bare and locked with a black shackle. Everyone was looking at the man. The great god on the second floor who appeared beside Yi Xian also looked at Yi Xian. Her eyes were solemn, extremely solemn. The man looked up at the starry sky. He closed his eyes slightly and said greedily, "Fresh air, it turns out to be so wonderful. Sure enough, things that have not been lost will never be cherished." In the starry sky, the Star Lord looked down at the man. "Who are you?" The man opened his eyes and looked at the Star Lord. He smiled and said, "Who?" As he said this, the smile on his face gradually widened. In the end, he laughed out loud, but there was a trace of desolation in his laughter. Yi Xian looked at the laughing man in the distance and asked the great god on the second floor softly, "Is he very powerful?" The great god on the second floor said softly, "Do you see the shackles on his feet? That was done by this pagoda in the past. To be able to make this broken pagoda do this, it already proves how powerful he is." Yi Xian nodded slightly. Now he hoped that the man and the Star Lord would both be injured. To him, this was undoubtedly the best thing that could happen. The man in front of him and the Star Lord were too strong. In the distance, the man slowly walked towards the starry sky. "You're asking who I am? Let me tell you, I am Di Xing Emperor." The Star Lord frowned. "Never heard of it." Di Xing laughed. "You are so weak, how could you have heard of it?" In the starry skies, the Star Lord narrowed his eyes. "You are the most arrogant person this Lord has ever seen. I hope your strength is worthy of your arrogance." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pointed down with his finger, and then a strand of cold light shot down violently from the starry sky. This strand of cold light was like a shooting star, and it was soundless and didn't emanate any energy fluctuations. The expressions of Wei Yang Tian and the others turned solemn when they saw the cold light. Even the great god on the second floor had a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Surpassing heaven and earth?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked. "What do you mean?" The great god on the second floor said in a deep voice, "This Star Lord has already touched the threshold of Tao. His strength has surpassed this world, and all the restrictions of this world are ineffective against him. Under such circumstances, to the people of this world, he is like a god, because he is outside the laws and isn't restricted by any laws of this world." Yi Xian looked up at Xing Emperor in the starry sky. At this moment, the strand of cold light had already reached the top of Xing Emperor's head. Under everyone's gaze, Xing Emperor gently waved his right hand. With this wave, that strand of cold light was like a cloud of green smoke, drifting away with the wind. Seeing this scene, the Star Lord in the starry sky narrowed his eyes, and there was an additional trace of seriousness in the depths of his eyes. When an expert made a move, it was obvious whether or not there was an expert. He knew that he had underestimated Xing Emperor in front of him. Below, Xing Emperor, this chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. He looked up at the Star Lord and shook his head. Really low level? As soon as he finished speaking, he gently stomped his right foot. It was extremely calm. But in the next moment, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically. Because the figures of countless people in the starry sky had suddenly started to turn illusory. It could be said that besides the Star Lord, the figures of everyone by his side had started to turn illusory as well. Everyone here was dumbstruck when they witnessed this scene, including the Star Lord. In next to no time, countless shrill cries resounded while many experts fled madly towards the depths of the starry sky. A few breaths of time later, the starry sky had become empty, and only the Star Lord remained. Meanwhile, Xing Emperor had arrived in front of the Star Lord. The Star Lord stared fixedly at Xing Emperor. "Who exactly are you?" Xing Emperor smiled. "A person that's been forgotten by history." The Star Lord took a step forward, and then he clawed at Xing Emperor from afar. This clawing motion caused the space around Xing Emperor to collapse and be obliterated at an extremely swift speed. Everyone watched as the space around the exalted Emperor began to burn. Just like that, it continued for an unknown period of time before the ball of flames gradually dispersed, and Xing Emperor was still completely unharmed. The Star Lord's pupils constricted when he witnessed this scene. "You? Impossible." Xing Emperor's eyes closed slowly. "Weak? You're too weak." As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings and spoke softly. "This stellar region is too weak. Too weak." The Star Lord stared fixedly at Xing Emperor. "Who exactly are you?" Xing Emperor smiled. Xing Emperor. The Star Lord spoke fiercely. I've never heard of you. Xing Emperor chuckled. Then die. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly vanished. But in the next moment he'd returned to where he stood just a moment ago. But at this moment he held a bloody head in his hand. It was the Star Lord's head. Everyone here was stunned. He was instantly killed just like that? Yi Xian was stunned as well. How could such a formidable Star Lord be instantly killed just like that? The god on the second floor who stood by Yi Xian's side spoke softly. Do you understand now? The experts in the outside world aren't on the same level as the experts in here. Yi Xian was speechless. Xing Emperor glanced at the head in his hand, shook his head, and then squeezed it lightly. Bang! The head transformed into nothingness. Xing Emperor looked towards the depths of the starry sky. Is my main body coming over? Main body. This Star Lord wasn't his main body but a clone. There was no response from the depths of the distant starry sky. Xing Emperor shook his head. Is boring. As he spoke he turned around to look at Yi Xian and the others. To be more precise, his gaze had descended onto Yi Xian. In an instant Xing Emperor appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent. Xing Emperor gazed at Yi Xian. This pagoda has trapped me for 67,000 years. 67,000 years. Do you know how it feels? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, It's quite uncomfortable. However, it doesn't seem to have much to do with me, right? Xing Emperor gazed at Yi Xian. You're the pagoda master. Yi Xian said, I'm not the one who trapped you here. If you want to take revenge, then you should look for the original owner of this pagoda. Xing Emperor shook his head. I can't defeat him. Yi Xian was speechless. Xing Emperor gazed at Yi Xian. This emperor doesn't want to waste time. I just want to ask, is the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda here? The owner of the pagoda? Yi Xian fell silent. The plain-dressed woman was here? He didn't know either. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. If the plain-dressed woman didn't appear, then he would be dead for sure. At the thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly activated the World Prison Pagoda. However, the moment the World Prison Pagoda appeared, it returned to his body. Yi Xian looked at Xing Emperor. Xing Emperor shook his head. You want to risk your life? No, you're too weak. That's not right either. I should say that you're too young. As his voice fell, his right hand gently pressed down on Yi Xian. With this pressure, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. At this moment he truly felt the aura of death. He felt that his body was about to shatter. At this moment, Great God on the second floor pulled Yi Xian behind her. She clawed at Xing Emperor. Xing Emperor shook his head and casually waved. Boom. Great God on the second floor instantly flew out. Wherever she passed, the space was annihilated and turned pitch black. Moreover, the laws of this world couldn't repair the space. Xing Emperor's hand fell toward Yi Xian. Unending sky suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Xing Emperor shook his head. Ant. As his voice fell, he blasted out a punch. Unending sky's expression changed drastically. Her arms suddenly blocked in front of her. Boom. Unending sky was instantly sent flying. Thousands of feet away, Unending sky had just stopped when her arms shattered into nothingness. Xing Emperor glanced at Unending sky and said softly, You can barely survive my attack. Unfortunately, in this emperor's eyes, you're still an ant. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Originally, I wanted to wait for the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda. But now it seems that he won't appear. As he said this, he shook his head. Unfortunately, it's a little less fun. After saying this, he glanced at everyone in front of him and said softly, You guys are really weak. This is the first day I come out. I'll use you guys as a sacrifice to the heavens. As he said this, he waved his hands. In an instant, the entire never-ending starfield began to tremble violently. Countless places began to shatter inch by inch. He was going to destroy the entire never-ending starfield. Seeing this scene, the painter's expression changed. Her figure trembled as she charged toward Xing Emperor. However, before she could get close to him, she was sent flying by a powerful force. Even the hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan was the same. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed in front of Xing Emperor. Soul-suppressing sword. One sword, soul-suppressing sword. As the sword fell, Xing Emperor suddenly stopped. However, he was completely fine because he had caught the soul-suppressing sword between two fingers. Yi Xian's face was filled with disbelief. Your soul? Xing Emperor said softly. The sword is barely passable. The sword technique is not bad. Unfortunately, you're too weak. This emperor's soul has long been immortal. How can a mere broken sword split it? As he said this, his fingers trembled slightly. Boom. The soul-suppressing sword suddenly collapsed, turning into countless fragments that slowly fell from the sky. At this moment, a weak voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Young lord, actually you're not bad. Little soul doesn't regret following young lord. Take care. Yi Xian was petrified on the spot. Xing Emperor chuckled. Are you in despair? This emperor likes to see your expressions of despair. As he said this, he was about to attack, but at this moment, buzz. A sword suddenly rang out from within Yi Xian's body. A sword suddenly flew out from the top of the tower. The sword soared into the sky and entered the starry sky. Then it landed steadily in a hand. Everyone looked up into the sky. There stood a swordsman in a cloud-white robe. Xing Emperor turned to look at swordsman and chuckled. Are you here? I hope you're not too weak. P.S. I want a prostitute. Ticket. Seeking a prostitute. End of this chapter. Chapter 494. It's here. Everyone looked up. There, a swordsman stood quietly. He was looking at the sword in front of him with a smile in his eyes. Below, Almighty on the second floor was also looking at the swordsman. There was a trace of doubt in her eyes. Because she did not know this swordsman. However, she knew that this swordsman should be the owner of one of the 3 swords at the top of the tower. Emperor Xing walked towards the swordsman with a bright smile on his face. For a powerhouse, the most terrifying thing was that the opponent was not strong enough. In the air, the swordsman gently stroked the sword in front of him and said softly, It's been many years. The sword trembled violently as if to express something. The swordsman chuckled and then looked at Emperor Xing, who was not far in front of him. The latter smiled and said, What's your name? The sword cultivator glanced at Di Xing. In the end, his gaze shot downwards, and it wasn't long before his gaze descended onto Yi Xian. He was slightly stunned when he saw Yi Xian, and then he said, Young man, can you come forward? Below, Yi Xian looked up at swordsman. After a moment of silence, he held the fragment of the sword soul and came in front of swordsman. The swordsman looked at Yi Xian and said softly, So that's how it is? Saying that, he shook his head and chuckled, Interesting. Yi Xian was puzzled. Senior? The swordsman looked at the pile of fragments in his hand. Your sword? Yi Xian nodded. The swordsman chuckled. Although the sword is broken, there is still hope to restore it. Yi Xian quickly asked, How to restore it? The swordsman smiled and said, Sword intent. Sword intent? Yi Xian was puzzled. How to restore the sword intent? The swordsman smiled slightly and did not speak. He looked at Emperor Xing in front of him. The latter smiled and said, Are you done? Swordsman looked at Dixing without saying anything. Di Xing chuckled. I hope you aren't too weak. Otherwise it would be too boring. Swordsman nodded. Make your move. Emperor Xing's smile became increasingly brilliant. You attack first. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before continuing, I'm afraid that you won't have the chance to attack after I attack. Crazy. Everyone in the surroundings was looking at Di Xing. Needless to say, Di Xing's arrogance was boundless. However, it was undeniable that he had the strength to do so. In front of Emperor Xing, swordsman nodded slightly, Then take my sword. Di Xing roared with laughter. One sword? So what if there are 10 or 100 of them? Swordsman shook his head. I never use a second sword. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. This sword was very slow, very slow, just like a normal person's sword. In the eyes of outsiders, this sword was extremely ordinary to the point that there was nothing extraordinary about it. However, Di Xing's expression changed drastically. In the next moment he pressed his palms together. Undying avatar. As soon as he spoke, a powerful force swept out from his body. As soon as this force appeared, the space in an area of tens of thousands of kilometers actually started to seethe as if it could not endure this force. Not only that, but a golden light suddenly appeared around him, and this golden light directly enveloped him. As the sword slashed down, the force in front of Di Xing instantly dissipated into thin air. 2 breaths of time later, the surroundings returned to calm. Swordsman stood there with his sword sheathed. Moreover, the golden light around Di Xing had silently vanished as well. The surroundings were deathly silent. Everyone was looking at swordsman and Di Xing. Who won? A short moment later, Di Xing's gaze suddenly became slightly dazed. No. Impossible. Di Xing started practicing martial arts at the age of 6, attained godhood at the age of 10, comprehended the grand Taos of the world at the age of 19, and became an emperor at the age of 26. No, how could I not even be able to withstand a single sword strike from you? No, no. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they heard Di Xing lost? He lost to swordsman? Swordsman looked at Yi Xian. The tower has acknowledged you as its master? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Swordsman spoke softly. This tower is extraordinary, and the person who created it is an extraordinary figure. It's a fortuitous encounter in your hands. You must grasp it well. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. This tower is very dangerous. Swordsman spoke softly. Indeed. The existence within the tower isn't something you can resist right now. As he spoke, he gazed at the sword in his hand. As if it understood Swordsman's intentions, the sword started to tremble lightly. Swordsman grinned and then he tapped with his finger. The sword suddenly shot into the center of Yi Xian's forehead, and then it returned to the top of the tower. In an instant, the entire world prison pagoda shook violently, but it quickly returned to calm. Swordsman gazed at Yi Xian. Until next time. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure gradually became ethereal. A clone. Everyone here was petrified when they witnessed this scene. Even Yi Xian was petrified on the spot. He hadn't imagined that Swordsman would actually be a clone. It was just a clone. The second floor expert by Yi Xian's side was astounded as well. As for Dixing, he had disbelief on his face and he stared fixedly at Swordsman. You're just a clone. Swordsman gazed at Dixing. You aren't particularly weak. At the very least, you were barely able to hold on until now after receiving a strike of my sword. As soon as he finished speaking, he'd vanished completely. As for Dixing, he was stunned for a moment before his figure started to gradually become ethereal. All the others here were speechless. Yi Xian suddenly gazed at Swordsman who still hadn't vanished. Have you seen that woman in a plain dress? Swordsman gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. No. Yi Xian fell silent. Swordsman said, Live well. Otherwise no one can stop them once they go berserk. Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, Them? Swordsman smiled but didn't say anything, and it didn't take long for him to vanish completely. Yi Xian frowned slightly as he stood on the spot, and he was completely bewildered. Right at this moment, Dixing suddenly gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression changed. This fellow wouldn't be thinking of dragging me down with him before he dies, right? Dixing gazed at Yi Xian. He just stared at Yi Xian and it caused Yi Xian's scalp to go numb. A short while later Dixing said, I have something that's on my mind. Yi Xian fell silent. He didn't say anything but he was cursing in his heart. What does it have to do with me if you have something on your mind? But he didn't say anything. Because this fellow was clearly going to die. He didn't want to infuriate Dixing at this moment so as to avoid Dixing taking him down with him. Dixing seemed to know what Yi Xian was thinking and he spoke indifferently, There are benefits. Benefits? Yi Xian still remained silent. Benefits were only benefits that could be seen and obtained. Things that couldn't be seen and obtained were just fleeting clouds. Dixing stared at Yi Xian. He opened his right hand, and there was a pitch-black spatial ring in his palm. The arch ring. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he asked, What is it? Dixing said, A precious treasure that contains an ultimate technique of mine. I don't want this ultimate technique to be lost. Besides that, this item is a symbol of status. If you have the chance to go to the Heavenly Star region in the future, this ring will be of great help to you. Yi Xian fell silent. Dixing said, There are 2 items from my collection in the spatial ring as well as some small trinkets. Both of those items aren't inferior to your sword. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Let's not talk about this for now. As he spoke, he took out the soul-suppressing sword fragment. If you can help me repair it, I'll agree to any of your conditions. Dixing glanced at Yi Xian and then he said, It's best if you repair it yourself. Yi Xian's brows furrowed slightly. What do you mean? Dixing said, Didn't that swordsman tell you just now? It'll be better if you repair the sword yourself. Yi Xian fell silent. Dixing said again, If you promise to do something for me, I'll do something for you before I die. Yi Xian looked at Dixing. What is it? Dixing said, I'll help you seal the 6th floor for a period of time. Yi Xian suddenly flew into a rage. What the F***CK? The 6th floor. Are you F***King done yet? At this moment he was on the verge of collapse. One floor after another, who could stand it? Who could stand it? In any case, when he heard the 6th floor he really couldn't stand it. Dixing was expressionless. Who are you blaming? Blame this tower. Hit it. Yi Xian, Dixing said indifferently, So, do you agree or not? Yi Xian said in a deep voice. What the hell is this sixth floor? Dixing shook his head. I don't know. Yi Xian's brows furrowed slightly. Dixing said, I originally wanted to go up and check it out, but unfortunately I can't enter. I originally wanted to completely recover my strength and then force my way in to see those buildings above. I want to see what qualifications they have to be locked up above me. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. So this guy was concerned about this. That's right, the other party was on the 5th floor and being locked up there meant that they were stronger than him. This guy was somewhat unconvinced. Dixing said softly, I want to see what's locked up there. If you agree to my conditions, I'll buy you some time. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, maybe, this 6th floor is easier to talk to? Dixing shook his head and chuckled. They'll definitely kill you. Yi Xian was puzzled. What? Dixing said, if they want to enter the legendary 5th dimension they must rely on this tower. Without this tower they can't enter at all. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, 5th dimension? Why do you all want to enter the 5th dimension? Dixing looked at Yi Xian. You don't understand, but perhaps you will understand in the future. I don't have much time. Have you considered it? Yi Xian was silent. Dixing said, don't you want to know the strength of the 6th floor? Yi Xian nodded. What conditions do you have? Dixing smiled slightly. Go to the Emperor Xing Star Field and find a woman called Mu Chuyen. Tell her that I'm very sorry about our agreement back then. Mu Chuyen. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I'll remember it. Dixing looked up at the end of the horizon. His eyes were somewhat blank. Actually, I'm really stupid. 3 swords are standing at the top of the tower. This means that this tower looked for the 3 of them back then. Clearly the 3 of them weren't locked up here. If I had kept a low profile perhaps I wouldn't have died. As his voice fell, he suddenly turned into a white light and entered Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian hurriedly sank his mind into his body. The white light directly entered the 6th floor. After a moment of silence, Dixing's voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. It's not from the 4th dimension. He hadn't finished speaking when Dixing's voice suddenly stopped, and then it completely vanished. Yi Xian was silent. Chapter 495. Not from the 4th dimension. Yi Xian did not speak for a long time. In the beginning he subconsciously thought that the people in the tower were all from the 4th dimension, but now it seemed that this was not the case. If not from the 4th dimension, then they must be from the 5th dimension. 5th dimension? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled bitterly. The 5th floor had just been dealt with and now there was the 6th floor. There was no end to it. At this time Wei Yang Tian walked in front of Yi Xian. Are you all right? Yi Xian shook his head. I'm fine for now. Wei Yang Tian nodded slightly. Go and rest for a while. Yi Xian nodded, turned around and left. The battle ended. The Moke clan and unending Starfield people turned around and left. There were no cheers, no joy. Because too many people had died on both sides. Although they won this time, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Below, Moxia came to the ground and walked to the place where Zhuqing self-destructed. Looking at the ground, Moxia did not speak for a long time. At this time, the hunchbacked old man walked to Moxia's side and patted Moxia's shoulder lightly. He is a good person. Moxia looked up at the starry sky and said softly, Ancestor, our Moke clan should not be content with just one person. The hunchbacked old man looked at Moxia. What do you want to do? Moxia looked into the depths of the starry sky. Become stronger. Revenge. The hunchbacked old man was silent. Moxia said, Weak, I'm too weak. I need to become stronger than that Star Lord. No, stronger than him. Only by becoming stronger, our Moke clan will not be bullied by others, and no one will die tragically. After saying that he turned around and left. The hunchbacked old man did not speak. On the other side, Yi Xian came to the city wall. As soon as he got on the city wall, the war army suddenly appeared in front of him and pulled him away. Soon the war army brought Yi Xian to a stone house. In the stone house, Baldy was lying there quietly without any signs of life. Yi Xian was stunned. War army's eyes were slightly red. An hour ago he was seriously injured. I took him to the stone house. He didn't let me inform you. Yi Xian walked up to Baldy and looked at the motionless Baldy. He clenched his fists and remained silent for a long time. He had not known Baldy for long, but in his heart, he had always treated Baldy as a brother. Keeper of order. Yi Xian took a deep breath. Brother, rest in peace. You won't die in vain. No one will die in vain. Revenge. Yi Xian had already made a decision. Moreover, this matter made him realize that as long as the pagoda was in his body, there would be countless people coming to find trouble with him. In the face of such trouble, he no longer chose to sit still and wait for death. Instead, he was prepared to take the initiative to attack. A moment later, after Yi Xian and the war army buried Baldi, Yi Xian turned around and left. At this moment, the war army suddenly said, "He died to save me." Yi Xian stopped. An iron-blooded man of the war army cried like a child at this moment, "Damn it, I'm too stupid. I'm really too stupid." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Live well for him." After that, he disappeared into the distance. Body, this chapter is not over, please turn the page. After that, the war army knelt in front of Baldi's grave for a long time. Yi Xian did not return to the stone house. He came to a dense forest. As soon as he arrived, he sat down. The soul-suppressing sword was destroyed, which meant that his dantian was gone. At this time he could not mobilize any strength, because the sword was his dantian, his foundation. Of course, this did not mean that he was powerless now. After all, the realm and intent were still there. In the dense forest, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. He spread his hands, and the fragments of the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his palm. Looking at the fragments of the soul-suppressing sword in his palm, Yi Xian whispered, "Little soul." There was no response. Yi Xian held the pile of fragments. Soon, two kinds of sword intents appeared around him. These two sword intents tightly wrapped around the soul-suppressing sword. Repair. He knew that swordsman and Emperor Xing would not lie to him. However, after an hour, the sword intents could not repair the soul-suppressing sword. It didn't work? Yi Xian frowned deeply. After a while he started again. This time he was not in a hurry and did it bit by bit. Sword intents. He used the sword intents to carefully feel the fragments of little soul. After about an hour he finally felt a weak aura. When he felt this weak aura, Yi Xian almost jumped up in excitement. However, he still restrained himself and continued to use the sword intents to feel that weak aura. Soon he began to use the sword intents as a line and then connected the fragments bit by bit. This was the method he had just thought of, and it was the only way. About 2 hours later, the soul-suppressing sword was reconnected by Yi Xian's sword intents. Yi Xian looked at the soul-suppressing sword in front of him nervously. "Little soul?" There was no response. Yi Xian's heart turned cold. Failed? At this moment, a weak voice sounded in front of him. "Young master," Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Little soul." Little soul whispered, "Did young master use the sword intents to repair me?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes. How about you hurry up now?" Little soul said softly, "Very weak. I need to rest for a while." Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Good rest." Little soul said softly, "Young master, your sword intents are very useful to me. In the future, can young master give me some sword intents every day?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "No problem." Little soul said, "Thank you, young master. I'm going to rest." In the field, the stone in Yi Xian's heart finally fell. "It's good that you're fine." Yi Xian suddenly turned around. Not far away, Enlancio stood quietly. Yi Xian walked in front of Enlancio. Enlancio asked, "Are you all right?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm fine." Enlancio said softly, "What's your next plan?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "I want to leave this place." Enlancio looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, "If I don't leave, there will be many people coming here. That Star Lord definitely won't let this matter go. I don't want to implicate this place." He didn't forget that the Star Lord was still alive. Although the other side was completely annihilated, his intuition told him that the other side definitely wouldn't let this matter go. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Not willing to let this matter go. Moreover, even if the other side let this matter go, he wouldn't let it go. Yi Xian was a vengeful person. If there was enmity, he would definitely avenge it. Enlancio raised her head to look at the starry sky. "Indeed, we should all go out and take a look." Yi Xian was stunned. "You want to go out too?" Enlancio looked at Yi Xian. "Can't I?" Yi Xian smiled. "Of course you can. We can go together." Enlancio nodded slightly, not saying anything. At this time, a black-robed man walked over from not far away. This person was the person that had come to help earlier. Yi Xian looked at the black-robed man. The black-robed man took off his black mask, and Yi Xian was instantly stunned. "It's you?" The person before him was Lin Songyun. Lin Songyun walked over to Yi Xian and smiled. "Young friend Yi, I trust you've been well since we last met." Yi Xian bowed deeply. "Thank you for earlier." Lin Songyun smiled. "Young friend Yi is too polite." He hesitated for a moment as he spoke and then he said, "Young friend, are you leaving this place?" Yi Xian nodded. Lin Songyun said, "There's a place that I recommend you go." Yi Xian asked, "Where?" Lin Songyun said in a low voice, "Divine Martial City." Yi Xian frowned slightly. Divine Martial City? Lin Songyun nodded. Divine Martial City is one of the few places in this galaxy that the Star-Lord can't interfere with. To be honest, the Star-Lord might not give up. After all, the treasure in your possession is too precious. But now he might not come in the open. At this time, Enlancio suddenly said, "Divine Martial City is the place that the Valkyrie founded?" Lin Songyun nodded. "Yes, she's a legendary figure." He looked at Yi Xian. "That place doesn't just have Wuyuan, it also has a sword sect. Young friend, you study the sword, so this place is really suitable for you." Sword sect? Yi Xian asked, "A swordsman sect? Is it strong?" Lin Songyun smiled. "A place that even the Star-Lord doesn't dare to provoke lightly. Do you think it's strong?" Yi Xian looked at Enlancio and the latter nodded. Yi Xian said, "Then let's go to Divine Martial City." At this time the war army suddenly walked over. He stopped in front of Yi Xian and said in a low voice, "Brother Yi, the palace lord is looking for you." Yi Xian nodded, then cupped his fists at Lin Songyun. "Senior Lin, let's talk later." After saying that, he and the war army turned and left. Lin Songyun also left. Enlancio was about to leave when Lian Wanli suddenly appeared in front of her. Lian Wanli looked at Enlancio and smiled. "Wanna fight?" Enlancio looked at Lian Wanli. "You like him?" Lian Wanli was stunned. "Like him? Yi Xian?" Enlancio nodded. Lian Wanli was about to speak when Enlancio said, "You like him?" There was a hint of provocation. Lian Wanli's eyebrows twitched. "This king likes him." Enlancio was silent for a moment, then she asked, "What do you like about him?" Lian Wanli thought for a long time and said, "I like him, can I?" Enlancio. "P.S. I want to ask for a prostitute, but I don't dare to say or ask." End of this chapter. Chapter 496. Yi Xian followed the war army to Endless Sky's stone house. Apart from Endless Sky there was a woman inside. It was Painter. Endless Sky looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Painter suddenly said, "Are you interested in ruling the never-ending starfield?" Yi Xian froze and shook his head. Painter asked, "Why?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "First, I like freedom. I don't like being bound. Second, I am not strong enough to make the factions of the never-ending starfield submit." Endless Sky suddenly said, "What is the real reason?" Yi Xian thought and said, "I want to leave this place." Endless Sky frowned. "Afraid of dragging us down?" Yi Xian said, "That treasure is with me so they won't give up. If I stay here, I will only bring endless trouble to this place. Also, I want to go out and gain experience." Wei Yang Tian and the painter looked at each other. In the end, Wei Yang Tian looked at Yi Xian. "Have you decided?" Yi Xian nodded. Endless Sky stood up and walked to Yi Xian. "Where do you plan to go?" Yi Xian said, "Divine Martial City." Endless Sky nodded slightly. "It is indeed a good place. It suits you. When are you leaving?" Yi Xian smiled. "In 2 days. I still have some small matters to settle." Endless Sky Tendo said, "Go." Yi Xian cupped his fists and left the stone house. Inside the stone house, Endless Sky said softly, "I told you long ago that he is not interested." The painter said, "But if the two of us leave this never-ending star zone?" Endless Sky shook her head. "With Mr. Bai around there will be no chaos." Painter looked at Endless Sky. "Where do you plan to go?" Endless Sky walked to the door of the stone house and looked up at the starry sky. "I have been guarding never-ending all these years and have never gone out to take a good look. Now it is time to do so." Master Painter said with a smile, "Indeed, without anything holding you back, I believe you will become even stronger." Wei Yang Tian looked at the artist. "What about you?" Master Painter laughed. "Shall we travel together?" Wei Yang Tian pondered for a moment before replying, "All right." At this moment, Painter seemed to have thought of something. She walked to Wei Yang Tian's side. "Mok clan." Wei Yang Tian said softly, "Peaceful coexistence." The painter laughed and said, "Very good." After Yi Xian left the stone house, he went to find Dugu Xian. At this time Yi Ling also came out of the prison pagoda, and the family of 3 reunited. Yi Xian started cooking while Yi Ling helped from behind. He would occasionally cause trouble and was very happy. A smile also appeared on Dugu Xian's face as she looked at the elated Yi Ling and Yi Xian. The reunion of the family of three was something that she had never dared to imagine, because at that time she had already been prepared to die. A moment later Yi Xian finished cooking. Yi Ling was about to eat, but Yi Xian looked at Dugu Xian. "Mother, try it." Hearing Yi Xian's words, Yi Ling blinked. Then she picked up a piece of lean meat and put it in Dugu Xian's bowl. She giggled. Dugu Xian's heart warmed. She gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head and looked at Yi Xian. "I heard that you want to leave the never-ending starfield?" Yi Xian nodded. "I want to take you with me." Yi Ling's eyes lit up and she said happily, "Okay." Dugu Xian was a little hesitant. Yi Xian looked at Dugu Xian. "Mother, do you have any concerns?" Dugu Xian nodded. Yi Xian put down his chopsticks and looked at Dugu Xian. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "I want to take Ling to Divine Martial City." Divine Martial City? Yi Xian was stunned. Then he smiled and said, "I want to go to Divine Martial City too." Dugu Xian looked at Yi Xian. "You want to go to Divine Martial City too?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes. I heard that there's a sword sect there. I want to go and learn from it." Then he seemed to think of something and looked at Dugu Xian. "Mother, why do you want to go to Divine Martial City?" Dugu Xian hesitated and said, "There might be news of your father there." "Father?" Yi Xian frowned slightly when he heard this word. Nearby, Yi Ling put down her chopsticks. The two siblings were very unfamiliar with this word. Dugu Xian said softly, "He is not a heartless person." Yi Ling glanced at Yi Xian. "It's fine as long as I have my brother." With that, she continued to eat. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he said, "We will go together when the time comes." Dugu Xian nodded. "Okay." After the meal, Yi Xian left the Great Wall of Burial Sky and went to the Moke clan. The Moke clan was familiar with Yi Xian now, so no one stopped him. On the mountain peak, Yi Xian met Emosia. Emosia looked at Yi Xian. "What's your plan?" Yi Xian said, "Cultivate and take revenge." Emosia nodded. "Count me in." Yi Xian turned and left. This time he came for an answer. It was good to have a friend on the road to revenge. Yi Xian returned to his stone house and took out the storage ring given to him by Di Xing before he died. There were two items in the ring. One was a pair of dark gold arm guards. The arm guards seemed to be made of some animal skin. They were soft and comfortable to the touch. Yi Xian put on the arm guards. In an instant he felt his arms tighten. Soon a powerful force gathered on his arms. Not only that, but an illusory beast shadow suddenly appeared behind him. The beast shadow was shaped like a tiger. It had a pair of wings and was completely black. It was covered in dark scales and emitted an extremely violent aura. What kind of demonic beast was this? Yi Xian frowned. At this time the Emperor Hound's voice suddenly sounded. "It should be an ancient dark demon tiger." Yi Xian asked, "Dark demon tiger?" The Emperor Hound said, "A very powerful demonic beast. Your arm guard has the soul of a dark demon tiger. Wearing this thing is equivalent to having the help of a dark demon tiger's soul. Your strength will increase by a lot. It's a good thing." Yi Xian nodded slightly. It was a good thing, so he naturally had to keep it. After putting away the arm guard, he looked at the second treasure. The second treasure was a model of a small boat. It was very small, only the size of a palm. Yi Xian was struck dumb at the sight of this thing. At this time, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, "It's an Imperial starship." Yi Xian quickly asked, "An Imperial starship?" The Archhound said, "Kid, this thing is even more precious than your arm guard. Even my god race only had one in the past because it has been lost. Now, I'm afraid it's even rarer." Yi Xian asked, "What's the use of this?" The Emperor Hound said in a deep voice, "It's very useful. An ordinary starship crossing the starry sky is dangerous because there are many starry sky rocks and black holes. Especially when passing through some black holes, it is very likely that it will be swallowed up by the black hole. But this Imperial starship is different. It is extremely sturdy and fast. It is the only starship that can cross galaxies. Most importantly, this is a defensive treasure. If you had the Imperial starship and used it, those foreign and Skyriver Starfield experts wouldn't have been able to break in at all. Even the Star Master's clone wouldn't have been able to do anything to it." Yi Xian was a little shocked. "It's so powerful?" The Emperor Hound said in a deep voice, "Boy, this thing is very, very precious. My god clan only had one in the past and it's obviously not as good as yours. Yours should be a real Imperial starship." At this point, the Emperor Hound paused and said, "You can go to the divine race now." "Divine race?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Go to the divine race?" The Emperor Hound said, "Do me a favor. If there are still survivors of the divine race, they may not be in a particularly good situation now. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "Is it far?" The Emperor Hound said, "It was very far for you before, but now that you have this thing, you can directly pass through any black hole, so it's not far." Yi Xian nodded, "Okay." To be honest, he also wanted to go to the divine race to see this once extremely powerful race. Of course, his real purpose was to see if there were any other treasures. In addition to the 2 treasures, Yi Xian also found 3 eggs. Very big eggs. Yi Xian took out the 3 eggs, a little puzzled. "Brother Emperor Hound, what are these?" The Emperor Hound said lightly, "How would I know?" Yi Xian. At this moment Xiaolinger appeared in front of Yi Xian, holding 2 fruits in her hands. Yi Xian looked at Xiaolinger, and Xiaolinger walked to the 3 eggs. She carefully looked at the 3 eggs, then looked at Yi Xian. "Give them to me." Yi Xian hesitated, then said, "You're not going to eat them, are you?" Xiaolinger gently tapped the 3 eggs, then smiled and said, "I'll take them to raise, maybe they'll hatch a bird." Yi Xian. Just like that, the 3 eggs were taken away by Xiaolinger. At this moment, the god on the 2nd floor suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian. "I'm leaving." Yi Xian's smile gradually disappeared. "Leaving here?" The god on the 2nd floor nodded and said softly, "I want to go back and have a look." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Where is your home?" The god on the 2nd floor said, "It's very far from here." Yi Xian asked again, "Will you come back?" The god on the 2nd floor looked at Yi Xian and nodded, "Yes. In the future I will need the help of your tower." Yi Xian smiled, "As long as I'm not dead, it's totally fine." The god on the 2nd floor looked up and said softly, "That Di Xing entered the 6th floor before he died. If I'm not wrong, the 6th floor should have awakened. Moreover, the other party may not be from the 4th dimension. As for whether he's from the 5th dimension or not, anyway you should know soon." Yi Xian was silent. The god on the 2nd floor looked at Yi Xian. "Don't worry, before that swordsman left, he used his sword to suppress this tower again. The 6th floor should not be able to come out in a short time. However, you have to be prepared. It's best if you gather all the Tao laws as soon as possible. Also, study these Tao laws when you're free, especially the Dream Tao law on the 2nd floor. If you can subdue it, it'll be of great help to you." Yi Xian nodded, "Okay." The god on the 2nd floor glanced at Yi Xian. "I hope the next time we meet, you'll still be alive." After saying that, she disappeared. Gone. In the prison tower, Yi Xian did not speak for a long time. The god on the 2nd floor also left. Tao laws. Yi Xian slowly clenched his fists. Facing this prison tower, he could not be passive anymore. He had to find Tao laws. The more Tao laws he had, the more he could counter the existence in this tower. Chapter 497. The Tao Law. Yi Xian arrived at the 2nd level. The Tao of Dreams was still there. Amongst the 3 Tao laws, only the Tao of Dreams hadn't been grasped. The reason he hadn't touched the Tao of Dreams in the past was because his strength hadn't been sufficient. He wasn't confident in his ability to control it. But now he wanted to give it a try. His current strength wasn't just a little bit stronger than it was in the past. Yi Xian walked towards the Tao of Dreams. Meanwhile, the Tao of Dreams suddenly trembled slightly. When Yi Xian arrived before it, he suddenly drew his sword and swung it. A ray of light slashed down. Crack. Something seemed to have collapsed here. His sword descended, but Yi Xian was still standing before the Tao of Dreams, and the Tao of Dreams wasn't affected at all. Meanwhile, Yi Xian swung his sword again. Just like that, Yi Xian drew his sword 10 times before he stopped. It was a dreamscape. He'd unknowingly fallen into a dreamscape as soon as he entered it. Moreover, it wasn't just a single dreamscape, it was 10. Even though he'd overcome the dreamscape, Yi Xian still felt quite fearful. It was very terrifying. He'd experienced how terrifying the Tao of Dreams was in the past, and it was very likely for the Tao of Dreams to silently kill him in his dreams. Even now, he still maintained 120% vigilance. Because he was afraid that the slightest mistake would cause him to fall to the Tao of Dreams. A short while passed before Yi Xian grabbed at the Tao of Dreams with his right hand. In the end, he decided to subdue it by force. It was impossible for such a treasure to make the other party willingly submit to it. He'd do it by force. As soon as Yi Xian grabbed, the Tao of Dreams suddenly transformed into a ray of light that entered the center of Yi Xian's forehead. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, but he noticed that he was completely fine. What's going on? Yi Xian's brows knit together tightly. He glanced at the surroundings and it was very calm. Another dreamscape? When he thought up to this point, he suddenly swung his sword. His sword flashed. A strand of light flashed, but the surroundings were still extremely calm and didn't seem strange at all. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and calmed himself down. After a while, his sword will spread out in all directions. This time he no longer looked at the world with his heart, but with his sword intent. Because the heart can sometimes lie. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. Under the perception of his sword intent, everything around him seemed so real. However, the more it was so, the more solemn his expression became. He did not believe that the Tao of Dreams would submit to him so easily. After a long time, Yi Xian left the world prison pagoda and returned to the stone house. At this time Yi Ling walked over. Just like before, Yi Ling quickly walked in front of him and pulled his arm, giggling, "Brother." Yi Xian was silent. Yi Ling asked softly, "What's wrong, brother?" Yi Xian led Yi Ling out of the stone house. Outside the stone house, everything seemed so normal. However, his heart told him that all of this was fake. It was fake. That thought had always been there and he couldn't get rid of it no matter what. He knew that it was fake, but everything before his eyes was so real. Real? Fake. Yi Xian turned around to gaze at Yi Ling, and Yi Ling chuckled brilliantly. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Fake is real, real is fake. What a Tao of Dreams. As soon as he finished speaking, the space around him trembled like ripples on water, but it didn't take long for it to return to normal. On the other hand, Yi Ling was still by his side and everything around him was the same as before. Yi Xian instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he noticed this. Earlier he'd thought that everything before his eyes was still an illusion, but Yi Ling felt so real. Yi Ling. If this chapter doesn't end, please keep going. Yi Ling's appearance allowed him to understand that everything before him wasn't an illusion. This was because Yi Ling was real, and there was no illusion in this world that could use Yi Ling to deceive him. Yi Ling was real, but everything around him was fake. This made him understand that the illusion before him was only half real. If he used his sword to kill Yi Ling, not only would he not be able to break the illusion, but he would also regret it for the rest of his life. At this moment, a tiny dream character suddenly condensed between Yi Xian's brows. At the same time, Yi Xian sensed the Tao of Dreams. At this moment, he sensed that the Tao of Dreams had established some kind of connection with him, just like the spatial Tao of Dreams and the major Tao of Dreams. The Tao of Dreams. Yi Xian smiled. He could finally use this Tao of Dreams. Yi Xian turned around and gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. "I'm going to cultivate." Yi Ling blinked. "Okay." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you want to go together?" Yi Ling was about to nod, but she seemed to have thought of something and shook her head. "I'll look for you later." Yi Xian smiled. "Okay." After saying that, he turned around and transformed into a sword light, disappearing into the horizon. On the city wall, Yi Ling looked at the horizon in the distance. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian came to a dense forest. With a wave of his right hand, the Moke sword floated in front of him. What he needed to do now was to fuse the Tao of Dreams with the sword Tao. Yi Xian discovered that the most terrifying thing about the Tao of Dreams was that it could create illusions. Moreover, it could create illusions silently, causing people to unknowingly fall into illusions. Moreover, it could create multiple illusions. With this ability and the flying sword, many people would not even know how they died. In the following period of time, Yi Xian started to study the Tao of Dreams like crazy. Because he had the Tao of Dreams, it was not difficult for him to study it. In the blink of an eye, 10 days passed. During these 10 days, Yi Xian cultivated almost every day. During these 10 days, many things happened in the never-ending star domain. One of the biggest things was the reconciliation between the never-ending star domain and the Moke clan. The Moke clan officially moved into the never-ending star domain. No one in the never-ending star domain objected to this, nor did they dare to object. This was because the painter and never-ending sky had already agreed. Therefore, the Moke clan was also a member of the never-ending star domain. On this day, the painter and never-ending sky came to the dense forest. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, stood up and walked to the two women. The painter sized up Yi Xian. "Cultivating?" Yi Xian nodded and said with a smile, "Seniors, did you come to find me for something?" The painter nodded. "We are leaving." "Leaving?" Yi Xian was stunned. Then he asked, "To where?" The painter smiled. "I don't know yet." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, "You have a treasure on you. Many people will definitely not let you go because the temptation is too great. So, you have to be careful." Yi Xian nodded. "I will be careful." The painter suddenly smiled. "You promised me something. You haven't forgotten, right?" Yi Xian smiled. "Of course. Senior, do you want to enter now?" The painter looked at Never-Ending Sky. Together? Never-Ending Sky hesitated and then nodded. Just like that, the two women entered the prison pagoda. Inside the pagoda, the two women looked around curiously. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. The treasure. The two of them had always been very curious about this treasure. Now that they had seen it, they were still a little shocked. Pressure. The two stood in front of the pagoda and felt a formless pressure. It was as if they were suffocating. A moment later, the two of them left the prison pagoda. The two of them exchanged glances. In the end, the painter looked at Yi Xian and said in a low voice, "This treasure of yours isn't ordinary." Yi Xian nodded. "I know." The painter said softly, "Take care of yourself." As she spoke, she tapped out with a finger. A strand of white light entered the space between Yi Xian's brows. "This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page." Yi Xian was puzzled. "What is this?" The painter said, "Our divine sense. You can contact us through this. If you need help in the future, you can contact us directly." Yi Xian's heart felt warm. He bowed slightly. "Thank you." The painter smiled. "Until next time." As she finished speaking, she turned around and vanished into the horizon. Never-Ending Sky looked at Yi Xian. "Your life is the most important." As she finished speaking, she turned around and vanished. Gone. Yi Xian looked at the horizon and said softly, "All of you have to live well as well." At this time, Lanxiu and Lian Wanli suddenly walked over. The two women walked in front of Yi Xian and Lian Wanli said, "I heard from Ling that you're going to that god race?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." "Are the two of you going together?" Lian Wanli shook his head. "I came this time to tell you that we're going to Divine Martial City first. It isn't just us, Ling and your mother are going as well." Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. "What?" Lanxiu said, "The profound gate will escort us there." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "I'm afraid Ling will be going with me." Lian Wanli smiled. "She took the initiative to go with us." Yi Xian was puzzled. Lian Wanli suddenly said, "She's grown up. She said that she wants to learn to be independent and that she can't always rely on you." Yi Xian shook his head. "What a silly little girl." Lian Wanli smiled. "You should be happy that she thinks like that. After all, her natural talent is extraordinary. If she cultivates properly, then she might not be inferior to you in the future." Yi Xian smiled. "That's true." Lian Wanli said, "We're leaving right now." Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, "So soon?" Lian Wanli nodded. "Divine Martial City is quite far, so the sooner we leave, the better." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Then I'll go bid my farewells to Ling." As he spoke, he turned around with the intention of leaving. Lian Wanli suddenly said, "There's no need." Yi Xian gazed at Lian Wanli, and the latter shook her head. "She's afraid that she won't want to leave after seeing you. So she won't meet you now. She said that she'll be waiting for you in Divine Martial City." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Wanli smiled. "See you in Divine Martial City?" As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left with Lanxiu. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of them, and Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Safety-wise." Lanxiu spoke softly, "Don't worry, the sect master, Master Painter, and Senior Midnight will personally escort us there. We won't be in danger." Yi Xian heaved a slight sigh of relief when he heard this. Master Painter, Midnight Heaven, and that sect master were working together. Unless the Star Lord himself arrived, otherwise Lanxiu and the others probably wouldn't be in any danger. Because all of them together were much more formidable than Yi Xian. Following these three people was much safer than following him. Lian Wanli gazed at Yi Xian and spoke in a low voice, "You on the other hand, you must be careful." Yi Xian nodded. "I know." Lian Wanli nodded slightly. "See you in Divine Martial City?" As soon as she finished speaking, both of them turned around and vanished into the horizon. In the dense forest, Yi Xian spoke softly, "Emperor Hound, let's go to the god race." Emperor Hound said, "Now?" Yi Xian said angrily, "Nonsense. My woman and sister have already gone to Divine Martial City. Why should I waste time here? Let's go to the god race and then to Divine Martial City." "Woman? Which one of them is your woman?" "Both of them." Yi Xian didn't even turn around. Emperor Hound. P.S. I've seen a lot of old friends recently. Seven Sister, Sprite, and that guy who keeps scolding me. As long as you don't scold my family, I won't be angry. I'm a writer and a reader, so I can empathize with the reader's feelings. Most of the time the readers scolded the authors because they liked them. They scolded them because they wanted the authors to write better. On the contrary, if they didn't scold them, it meant that they didn't read them. I like being praised by you, saying that Director Luan is awesome, but I also listen to the readers' opinions. I'm grateful for you guys. End of this chapter. Chapter 498. After bidding farewell to the war army and Baldi, Yi Xian left the never-ending starfield and arrived in the vast starry sky. In the starry sky, Yi Xian stood quietly. In his hand was the Imperial Starship. Yi Xian pondered for a long time before he figured out how to activate the Imperial Starship. Yi Xian held the Imperial Starship and muttered a few words. Soon, the Imperial Starship in his hand trembled. The next moment, the Imperial Starship suddenly turned into a beam of white light and appeared not far away. At that moment, the Imperial Starship was nearly 1,000 feet long, and it was surrounded by a stream of light. Imposing. That was Yi Xian's first impression. Yi Xian stood on the Imperial Starship. He had to admit that the Imperial Starship was very imposing. It was completely different from those cloud ships. The two were not on the same level at all. Not only that, but there were all kinds of arrays on the Imperial Starship, some for defense, some for attack. As long as he had enough purple origin crystals, he could activate these arrays. At that moment, the archdog appeared beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the archdog and it said softly, "Let's go." Yi Xian said, "You do it." The archdog nodded slightly. Soon, the Imperial Starship started and flew into the depths of the starry sky. At first it was very slow. Yi Xian turned his head and looked down. From his position, he could still vaguely see the Great Wall of Burial Sky. However, the Great Wall of Burial Sky was getting smaller and smaller because the Imperial Starship was getting faster and faster. Soon Yi Xian could no longer see the Great Wall of Burial Sky. At that moment, the Imperial Starship's speed had reached its peak. It was so fast that even Yi Xian was astonished. Because the Imperial Starship's speed had exceeded the speed of his flying sword. What terrifying speed! Soon Yi Xian and the archdog disappeared into the depths of the vast starry sky. Not long after Yi Xian and the archdog left, a group of people suddenly arrived at the Great Wall of Burial Sky. Under the Great Wall, the leader was a woman. She wore silver armor and had a ponytail, looking very valiant. Beside the woman, there was another woman and two men. These four people were Jiang Jiu, Mo Yunqi, Bai Zhe, and Jianji. Mo Yunqi suddenly said, "Ninth Princess, do you think the gap between us and Bandit Yi is big?" In front, Jiang Jiu said calmly, "Whether he's big or not, won't you know after you fight him?" Mo Yunqi chuckled, "That's for sure." As he spoke, he looked at Bai Zhe beside him. "Big guy, you go first." Bai Zhe glanced at Mo Yunqi. "I don't know if I can defeat Bandit Yi, but I can definitely defeat you." Hearing this, Mo Yunqi laughed coldly with a look of disdain. Bai Zhe said calmly, "Do you want to try now?" Just as Mo Yunqi was about to speak, Jiang Jiu suddenly stopped. In front of them stood a man. This person was the War Army. War Army looked at Jiang Jiu and the others. "You are." Jiang Jiu said, "Is Yi Xian around?" "Yi Xian?" War Army was stunned and then said, "You are?" Jiang Jiu said, "His friend." "Friend." The wariness in War Army's eyes disappeared. He smiled and said, "You're late. Yi Xian has already left." Left? Mo Yunqi jumped in front of War Army. "Where did he go?" War Army said, "I don't know the specifics, but he will go to Shenwu City in the future." Shenwu City? Mo Yunqi and the others looked at each other. Finally, Jiang Jiu said in a deep voice, "Is it far?" War Army nodded. "Very far." As he spoke, he looked at Mo Yunqi and the others. "Why are you looking for him?" Mo Yunqi said, "To beat him up." War Army looked at Mo Yunqi with a strange expression. Mo Yunqi said with some dissatisfaction, "What's with your expression? Why, are you looking down on me?" War Army smiled and said, "I don't mean that, but Brother Yi is very strong now." Mo Yunqi patted his chest. "Do you know who I am?" War Army looked at Mo Yunqi and Mo Yunqi said seriously, "Back then I was the one who pressed him to the ground and rubbed him." War Army? Mo Yunqi still wanted to say something, but Bai Zhe on the side suddenly said, "If you don't shut up, I will hit you." Mo Yunqi. At this time Jiang Jiu suddenly said, "To Shenwu City." Jianji nodded. "To Shenwu City?" Jiang Jiu looked at War Army. "How do I get to Shenwu City?" War Army hesitated and then said, "It's very dangerous for you to travel in the starry sky. How about this? I will take you to see Mr. Bai and let Mr. Bai send someone to escort you." Jiang Jiu said, "Thank you very much." War Army smiled and said, You are his friends, so you are my friends. Don't be polite. Come with me. Soon War Army brought Jiang Jiao and the others to see Mr. Bai. 2 hours later, a Star Cloud warship set off from Burial Sky Great Wall. On the Star Cloud warship, there was Jiang Jiao and the others, and there was an additional War Army. Their target was the Divine Martial City. On the Star Cloud warship, Mo Yunqi suddenly shouted, "Shenwu City, I am coming, tremble." At this time, Bai Zhe kicked Mo Yunqi. In the starry sky, the Imperial starship shuttled through, ignoring all black holes and spatial rocks. Yi Xian stood at the bow of the ship. He looked at the starry sky in the distance and said softly, "Brother Emperor Dog, are the Protoss all very arrogant?" Emperor Dog said, "Not just an ordinary kind of arrogance. You have to be mentally prepared." Yi Xian said, "Brother Emperor, do the Protoss have any treasures? Those especially powerful treasures, and I'm just asking." Emperor Dog said calmly, "This is your real goal." Yi Xian said seriously, "You think too badly of me. I Yi Xian am not that kind." Stop. Emperor Dog suddenly said, "Don't talk to me about this. You know what kind of person you are." Yi Xian, Emperor Dog suddenly said, "My Protoss has a treasure." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What is it?" Emperor Dog said solemnly, "The Divine King's throne." Yi Xian asked, "What is that?" Emperor Dog said, "It is a chair." Yi Xian asked, "What is it used for?" Emperor Dog said, "I don't know." Yi Xian's mouth twitched. "You don't know? How can you not know?" Emperor Dog said angrily, "I have never sat on it, how would I know?" Yi Xian, Emperor Dog said, "This Divine King's throne is my Protoss treasure. Only the Protoss Patriarch can sit on it. As for how powerful it is, I don't know." Yi Xian smiled. "Is it stronger than my tower?" Emperor Dog said calmly, "What are you showing off for? Do you think you can set up this tower? If you die in the future, it will definitely be this tower that kills you." When it spoke up to hear, it paused for a moment and said, "Kid, where did you get this damn pagoda?" Yi Xian said, "Someone gave it to me." Emperor Dog. After chatting with Emperor Dog for a while, Yi Xian handed the Imperial starship to Emperor Dog. Then he returned to his room. Cultivation. During this period he had been crazily cultivating the Dream Dao Law every day. To be precise, he was studying the 3 Dao Laws every day, hoping to fully develop the power of the 3 Dao Laws. Especially the Dream Dao Law. He liked the Dream Dao Law more and more. This was because the combination of the Dream Dao Law and his flying sword was truly too perfect. Dream Sword. In the following period, Yi Xian cultivated crazily every day. 5 days later, the Imperial starship suddenly trembled. In the room, Yi Xian hurriedly got up and went to the cloud board. He looked up and saw that they were shuttling through a black hole. All around, powerful forces kept hitting the Imperial starship. These forces were so strong that even he was a little afraid. If it had been a nebula warship, it would have been smashed to pieces. Yi Xian looked at Emperor Dog. "What is this?" Emperor Dog said, "A black hole." Yi Xian said, "We have shuttled through many black holes before, but nothing like this." Emperor Dog said, "There are strong and weak black holes. Don't worry, this Imperial starship can withstand it." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "How much longer until we arrive?" Earth hesitated and said, "I don't know." Yi Xian looked at Emperor Dog in shock. "You're not joking?" Emperor Dog smiled awkwardly. "I haven't been back in a long time. I can't remember the route clearly." Yi Xian's face darkened. "You're not joking with me?" Emperor Dog chuckled. "In any case, it's this direction. It can't be wrong." Yi Xian was speechless. Just like that, about 2 hours later, the Imperial starship passed through the black hole and arrived in a star sector. The Emperor Dog quickly looked around. As it looked around, it frowned. Yi Xian asked, "What is it?" Emperor Dog said, "It seems familiar." Yi Xian asked, "Is it here?" Emperor Dog said in a deep voice, "Let's take a stroll first." Yi Xian nodded and steered the Imperial starship forward. Yi Xian found that the surrounding starry sky was very quiet. Moreover, there was no aura of life. Not only that, but the spiritual energy in this star sector was very thin. At this time, Emperor Dog beside Yi Xian suddenly said, "After something happened to the god race, the underworld race took the opportunity to invade. I was also trapped in that endless purgatory. After so many years, the god realm should have undergone earth-shattering changes. I hope there are still people from the god race." Yi Xian said, "Something happened to the god race? Is it because of Jian Zizai?" Emperor Dog nodded. Its face was a bit bitter. "If the Patriarch hadn't gone too far, our god race wouldn't have declined. And she wouldn't have hated the god race so much. Not only did she kill all the god race powerhouses, but she also destroyed the god race's ancestral shrine. Sigh. Yi Xian nodded slightly. What's the point of valuing men over women? I think women are also very powerful. Among the women he knew, it seemed that women were more powerful. He just didn't know if the sixth floor was a male or female. If it was a female, then the matter might not be so serious. Emperor Dog said again, those old fellows of the god race are too stubborn. Yi Xian nodded. Just as he was about to say something, Yi Xian and Emperor Dog looked up at the same time. In the starry sky there stood a giant sword. The giant sword was thousands of feet long, standing in the starry sky. The giant sword didn't have a sword tip, as if it had been cut off by someone. On the front of the giant sword there were two big black words, Sword Sect. Chapter 499. Sword Sect. Yi Xian was struck dumb as soon as he saw the two big characters. Sword Sect? He had once seen these two words in a new world. There was a sect there and it was also called the Sword Sect. What was the connection between these two sword sects? After a while Yi Xian turned to look at the Emperor Hound. Is this the divine realm? The Emperor Dog glanced at its surroundings and said, perhaps. Yi Xian was speechless. The Emperor Hound chuckled. Since we're here, let's go and take a look. Yi Xian was speechless. This fellow had definitely led him to the wrong place. This was not the divine realm. Yi Xian looked into the distance. The huge sword stood towering in the starry sky. It was very majestic and it gave off a feeling that it could pierce through the sky. Moreover, it carried an extremely powerful sword aura. Yi Xian silently sensed the aura. This sword aura was like a surging wave that seemed capable of destroying everything. Not simple. After a while Yi Xian said, let's go and take a look. After saying that, he led the Emperor Hound to the huge sword. Standing under the huge sword, the sword aura became even more powerful, and the pressure made it difficult to breathe. The Emperor Hound glanced at the huge sword and said in a low voice, this place is not simple. Yi Xian nodded. It is not simple. Let's go and take a look. After saying that, he led the Emperor Hound around the huge sword. In the distant starry sky behind the huge sword stood a huge and damaged palace. There were 72 flying swords circling above the palace. Apart from that, the sound of swords could be heard from time to time around the palace. Yi Xian frowned slightly. There's someone here? However, he didn't sense any signs of life. Yi Xian sped up and soon he and the Monarch Hound arrived in front of the main hall. As soon as they arrived, several flying swords shot towards him and the Monarch Hound like bolts of lightning. Yi Xian remained expressionless and did not dodge. The two flying swords shattered the moment they reached him. At the same time, a black and a white sword appeared in front of him. Right at this moment, a sword howl suddenly resounded from within the hall, and then a ray of light suddenly shot into the sky from within the hall. Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound looked up. Tens of thousands of swords had gathered in the air, and they were circling in the air. At that moment, the tens of thousands of swords suddenly turned around and pointed their tips at Yi Xian and the Emperor Dog. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's face darkened. Was this sword formation being controlled by someone? Yi Xian didn't have the time to think about it when the swords suddenly shot down at an extremely swift speed, and they instantly arrived above Yi Xian and the Monarch Hound. The Monarch Hound was just about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, allow me. As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his fingers together and spun them slightly. Boom. Two sword howls resounded abruptly, and then a black and white ray of light suddenly appeared here. As soon as they appeared, the sound of slicing resounded, and it only took a short moment for the tens of thousands of swords to be transformed into a pile of pieces. The Monarch Hound couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's flying swords were much faster than before. Yi Xian raised his head and looked towards the distance. In the next moment he'd appeared before the hall, but the hall was completely empty. There wasn't a single person within it. Yi Xian frowned. No one. But right at this moment, a ray of light suddenly appeared within the hall, and it slashed down towards him. Yi Xian pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. Bang! With this one point, the sword light immediately shattered. Yi Xian raised his head and looked over. There was a wooden figure that held a sword in its hand standing on a stone platform within the hall. Yi Xian was quite puzzled. Was that fellow the one who created that ray of light? At this moment, the wooden man suddenly leaped up and landed right in front of Yi Xian. At the same time, the long sword in its hand pierced towards Yi Xian's forehead as fast as lightning. At the instant that the wooden figure attacked, Yi Xian suddenly attacked as well. It was even swifter than before, and it stabbed against the wooden figure's chest. However, just Yi Xian's expression changed when he pierced the wooden puppet's chest. This was because his sword did not pierce through the wooden puppet in front of him. On the contrary, the wooden puppet's sword was already several inches away from his forehead. Yi Xian tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot and moved backwards. Suddenly, the speed of the wooden figure's sword increased explosively. When Yi Xian retreated more than 10 feet, a drop of blood slowly fell from where he had been standing. Yi Xian gently touched the spot between his eyebrows. There was a small sword scar there. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the wooden figure in the distance. At that moment, there was a trace of seriousness on his face. The speed of the wooden figure's sword had started off at a deceptive speed. The sudden acceleration at the end was the wooden figure's true speed. He had been tricked. To be more accurate, he had underestimated his opponent. In the distance, the wooden figure lightly pointed its sword at Yi Xian. Its provocation was self-evident. Not far away, the Emperor Hound suddenly laughed. Seeing Yi Xian suffer a setback, it felt inexplicably happy. Yi Xian wielded his sword and walked towards the wooden figure. At that moment, the wooden figure didn't attack. It just stood there quietly. When Yi Xian was half a foot away from the wooden figure suddenly attacked. A cold light flashed. Almost at the same time, Yi Xian also attacked. It was a tit for tat. However, in the blink of an eye, Yi Xian retreated more than 10 feet. There was a deep sword mark on his right arm. In the distance, the wooden figure was still standing in its original spot, not moving an inch. Not far away, Yi Xian had an ugly expression on his face. In that instant, he had attacked with the wooden figure at the same time. His sword speed wasn't any slower than the wooden figure's. However, he had lost. This was because the wooden figure hadn't attacked with one sword, but two. There was another sword in the wooden figure's left hand. This wooden figure was using two swords. Not far away, the Emperor Hound also stopped smiling. There was a trace of solemnity in its eyes. If Yi Xian had been careless and underestimated his opponent at the beginning, then this time Yi Xian had been defeated. The Emperor Hound was very clear about Yi Xian's attainments in swordsmanship. For this wooden figure to be able to defeat Yi Xian twice in a row, it could be said that it was a little terrifying. Not far away, Yi Xian fell silent. Reflect. Why did I lose just now? Was it simply because the wooden figure had used two swords? Actually, that wasn't entirely the case. There was another reason, and that was that his sword speed wasn't fast enough. Moreover, his reaction time wasn't fast enough because he hadn't even been able to react when the wooden figure had attacked a second time. This was a suppression of speed and awareness. Yi Xian looked at the wooden figure in the distance and he was slightly puzzled. Is this really a wooden figure? At this moment, the wooden figure suddenly pointed its sword at Yi Xian, indicating for Yi Xian to continue. Yi Xian walked towards the wooden figure with his sword in hand. At the side, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, "Watch out." It could tell that this wooden figure's every move was lethal and had no intention of holding back. Yi Xian nodded and then he walked over to the wooden figure. This time the wooden figure didn't attack and neither did Yi Xian. The man and the wooden figure just stood there for an entire hour. During this hour, neither Yi Xian nor the wooden figure had attacked. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly attacked, and at the instant that Yi Xian attacked, the wooden figure attacked as well. The swords were extremely fast and they were dual swords. At the instant that the wooden figure attacked, the two flying swords silently slashed towards the wooden figure's head. However, Yi Xian hadn't expected that as soon as his flying swords appeared, they would be knocked away by the wooden figure. At the same time, one of the wooden figure's swords directly arrived between his eyebrows. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly dodged backwards. As soon as he did so, the wooden figure suddenly stabbed its sword at him from afar. As soon as the sword stabbed out, four shadows holding swords suddenly appeared around Yi Xian. Before Yi Xian could react, the four swords had already arrived at all the vital points of his body. At this moment, two flying swords suddenly appeared around him, and soon rays of sword light appeared around him. Almost in an instant, his whole body was surrounded by these rays of sword light. Amidst the sword light, Yi Xian's expression was solemn. The four shadows around him had swords that were too fast, so fast that his flying swords could barely block them. On the side, the Emperor Dog's expression was also somewhat solemn. It had seen how fast Yi Xian's flying swords were, but the speed of the four shadows in front of it was unexpectedly faster than Yi Xian's flying swords. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed forward with his sword. This sword slashed directly towards the shadow in front of him. However, as soon as his sword slashed down, the shadow sword suddenly stabbed below the tip of his sword. At this moment Yi Xian's expression changed greatly, because he found that the power of his sword seemed to have disappeared at this moment. At this moment the shadow closed in, boom. In an instant Yi Xian retreated nearly 100 zhang. In front of Yi Xian the sword light disappeared, and the four shadows suddenly returned to the wooden man's body. The wooden man did not continue to attack. It returned to its original position, its long sword pointed diagonally to the ground, and it did not emit any aura. Yi Xian glanced at his body. At this moment, there were no less than 30 sword scars on his body. These 30 sword scars were all left by the shadow from before. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the wooden man not far away. At this moment he suddenly felt a little confused. Was a wooden man so powerful? From the beginning to the end, this wooden man did not use any sword skills, only pure swordsmanship. He was defeated by the opponent's swordsmanship. Moreover, it was after using the flying swords. In front of this wooden man, whether it was the speed of his sword, strength or technique, he was completely suppressed by the opponent. At this moment the Emperor Dog walked to Yi Xian's side. "Do you still want to fight?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course." With that he walked toward the wooden man. Soon Yi Xian and the wooden man started fighting again, but after a while he was completely defeated. Fortunately the wooden man did not chase after him. As long as he left the hall, the wooden man would stop. Therefore, although he was defeated, as long as he left the hall, his life would not be in danger. Just like that, Yi Xian went to the wooden man again and again, but he was defeated every time. The only difference was that he lost for a longer period of time. 3 days later Yi Xian could withstand the wooden man's sword for an hour. 5 days later Yi Xian could withstand it for an hour. 10 days later Yi Xian already had the strength to fight. 15 days later Yi Xian came before the wooden man again. This time he was confident that he could defeat it. He walked in front of the wooden man, but this time, unlike before, the wooden man did not wait for him to attack, but suddenly attacked first. Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. Just as he was about to attack, the wooden man seemed to know that he was going to attack, and directly stabbed his wrist. This stab forced Yi Xian to retreat, because if he attacked with his sword, it would be equivalent to using his wrist to block the wooden man's sword. Retreat. Yi Xian's reaction was also very fast. After he took a step back, he unsheathed his sword and slashed. Unsheathing the sword to determine life and death. However, this sword was only halfway through, and the wooden man's sword was already half an inch away from his eyebrows. Yi Xian had no choice but to stop and retreat again. Half a breath later Yi Xian had retreated to the door, and this time the wooden man suddenly stopped and retreated. Defeated. Yi Xian's mind was filled with terror. After the wooden man attacked first, he was actually defeated in an instant. At this time the wooden man not far away suddenly spoke. The ancestor said, "The sword strike first, pay attention to the unchanging, find the flaw, one sword to break all methods, one move to kill." Yi Xian looked at the wooden man and asked, "What sword strike first?" The wooden man said, "The sword strike first, pay attention to the preemptive strike, seize the initiative and win by surprise." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "Who is your ancestor?" The wooden man said, "You have the ancestor's aura on you, Yi Xian. P.S. Do you still have your tickets?" Chapter 500. Ancestral Master's Aura? Yi Xian frowned. "What do you mean?" The wooden man, "Ancestral Master's Aura." Yi Xian asked again, "What Ancestral Master's Aura?" The wooden man, "Ancestral Master's Aura." Yi Xian was speechless. He finally understood. This wooden man was most likely just a wooden man, not a living being. At this time, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, "This wooden man should be in existence similar to a strength imparter." Strength imparter? Yi Xian looked at the Emperor Hound, and the Emperor Hound nodded. "My God clan once had such existences. They are not living beings, but they have extremely strong battle awareness and combat ability. Their role is to pass down and teach, and this wooden man before you should be the same. However, this fellow is much stronger than the strength imparters of my God clan. The person who set it up should be an extremely powerful swordsman." Yi Xian nodded. He was very impressed with this wooden man because its swordsmanship was truly strong. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian looked at the wooden man. "My ancestral master's aura?" The wooden man, "Ancestral Master's Aura." Yi Xian walked in front of the wooden man. This time, the wooden man did not draw its sword, but Yi Xian still did not dare to be careless, because if the wooden man suddenly drew its sword, Yi Xian was not 100% sure he could block it. But this time the wooden man did not make a move. Yi Xian walked in front of the wooden man and lightly touched it with his right hand. It was just a simple piece of wood, not some special material. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Follow me." The wooden man, ancestral master's aura. Yi Xian chuckled and directly recalled the wooden man into the world prison pagoda. As soon as it entered the world prison pagoda, the wooden man was about to resist, but at this time, it suddenly looked up and slowly walked to the top of the pagoda. At the top of the pagoda, the wooden man walked in front of one of the swords and stood there, not moving an inch. Outside the world prison pagoda, Yi Xian frowned. Was this wooden man related to the master of the sword at the top of the pagoda? After a while, Yi Xian stopped thinking about this problem. In any case, from his point of view, this wooden statue was now his. When he had nothing to do, he could use the wooden puppet as a sparring partner. If he encountered a powerful enemy, this wooden puppet would be a super helper. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and raised his head to look at the great hall in the distance. The great hall was somewhat dilapidated and was covered in a thick layer of dust. The Emperor Hound whispered, "This place must have experienced some kind of disaster." Yi Xian nodded and then he said, "Let's go take a look and see if there are any treasures." Emperor Dog. Yi Xian walked around but did not find any valuable treasures. Other than that, he didn't find anyone else. Not even a soul body. In the end, Yi Xian decided to leave. However, right when he was about to leave, a sword howl suddenly resounded from a mountain range behind the hall. Yi Xian was stunned and then he hurriedly said, "Let's go, there are treasures." After saying that, he directly disappeared not far away. The Emperor Hound's face was somewhat ugly. Was he really going to bring this guy to the celestial race? Now it was somewhat hesitant. If this guy went to the celestial race, it did not dare to imagine. The Emperor Hound sighed softly and then it followed. After Yi Xian arrived at the back of the mountain, he followed the source of the sword howl to a bamboo forest. In the bamboo forest there was a bamboo house and beside the bamboo house was a pool. Yi Xian walked to the bamboo house and the bamboo house was empty, not a single person was inside. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Where did that sword howl come from? After a while Yi Xian walked into the bamboo house, and on the wall of the house hung a sheathed sword. Other than that there was nothing else. Yi Xian walked to the sheathed sword. At this moment the sword slightly trembled and a sword howl sounded from the sword. Yi Xian held the sword with his left hand, and his right hand held the hilt. He gently pulled. However, when he pulled, the sword did not move at all. Yi Xian was stunned and then he forcefully pulled but the sword still did not move. Yi Xian frowned and he circulated the celestial qi in his body, and then suddenly pulled. The sword did not move at all. Yi Xian looked at the Emperor Hound, and the Emperor Hound said, "Let me try." Yi Xian nodded and handed the sword to the Emperor Hound. The Emperor Hound held the sheath with one paw and the hilt with the other and pulled. However, the sword still did not move at all. At this moment Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound had somewhat serious expressions. The Emperor Hound said in a low voice, "This sword is not simple." As it spoke, it handed the sword to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian took the sword, he carefully looked at it. The sheath was very ordinary, like ordinary iron, and the hilt was also very ordinary. There was nothing eye-catching about it. What sword is this? Yi Xian played with the sword in his hand and he was somewhat puzzled. Although the sword looked very ordinary, he knew that if he and the Emperor Hound could not pull it out, it was definitely not an ordinary sword. At this moment, the sword suddenly trembled. Yi Xian held the hilt, and the hilt shook violently as if it wanted to come out. Yi Xian pulled again but the sword still did not move. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "This sword is a bit strange." The Emperor Hound nodded. "We will study it later, we have to go." Yi Xian nodded, put away the sword, looked around and then turned to leave. Soon the Emperor Hound and Yi Xian left the sword sect. In the starry sky, Yi Xian suddenly stopped, looked back at the sword sect in front of him and said in a low voice, "This should have been a very powerful sect." The Emperor Hound said, "My celestial race was even grander than this place but still," as it spoke it looked at Yi Xian, "all these years I have learned a truth: no matter how powerful a faction is, it will be destroyed one day. No faction can exist forever." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Let's go." With that, he turned and left with the Emperor Hound. After Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound left, a black-robed man and an old man suddenly appeared on the giant sword. The black-robed man looked coldly in the direction in which Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound had left. "He is Yi Xian?" The old man nodded. "Yes." The black-robed man said in a low voice, "Why did you stop me just now?" The old man said, "The planet lord only wanted us to follow him." The black-robed man said coldly, "This person is so weak, why not just kill him now?" The old man looked at the black-robed man. So weak? In the Battle of Never-Ending Star Field, the Planet Lord's clone died, and the entire Alliance army was annihilated, all because of this person. You think he is weak? The black-robed man narrowed his eyes and did not speak. The old man said softly, the Planet Lord only needs us to follow him. Now that the Planet Lord is healing, we should not act rashly and ruin the Planet Lord's plan. The black-robed man was silent for a moment, then he turned to look at the sword sect behind him. Do you know what faction this sword sect used to be? The old man shook his head. I don't know. The black-robed man said, there is also a sword sect in Shinwu City. I don't know if this sword sect is related to that sword sect. The old man looked at the sword sect in the distance and shook his head. I don't know, this place is too remote. The black-robed man said coldly, Yi Xian must have had some fortuitous encounter in this sword sect. If we let him go, he will become a big problem in the future. The old man said in a deep voice, Planet Lord means, the black-robed man sneered, I know what the Planet Lord means, but if we kill him now, get that treasure and then give it to the Planet Lord, do you think the Planet Lord will blame us? Moreover, this person's goal is Shinwu City. Once he enters Shinwu City, you and I will not have a chance to attack. So, I want to take a risk. If we can kill him, it's best, but if we can kill him, it's fine. No, with our strength, we should be able to escape unscathed. At this moment, from the sword sect in the distance, a sword light suddenly flew out. The black-robed man's voice stopped abruptly. The next moment, his head suddenly tilted and fell from his neck. The old man beside the black-robed man was stunned. The next moment, he turned around and ran, disappearing at the end of the starry sky in the blink of an eye. On top of the giant sword, a bloody head slowly fell to the ground. On the Imperial starship, Yi Xian asked, Brother D, do you know the way or not? After leaving the sword sect, they had been shuttling through the starry sky for several hours, and they had been shuttling back and forth. Not far from Yi Xian, the Emperor Hound looked around, a little puzzled. It should be this area, why isn't it here? Yi Xian looked around, the starry sky was silent, only the stars twinkling. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, could it be that there is a formation to hide the location of the God domain? The Emperor Hound was stunned, then suddenly realized, why didn't I think of that? Yi Xian nodded slightly, let me see. Saying that, he slowly closed his eyes and soon, his sword intent spread out. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly bent his finger, a sword light piercing through the sky. Thousands of feet away, the space there suddenly rippled like water. Soon, under the gaze of Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound, an illusory black flag suddenly appeared in that space. Seeing this, the Emperor Hound hurriedly said, illusory formation, this is my god race's illusory formation. Someone from my god race must be alive. Before it finished speaking, an old man suddenly appeared in front of them. The old man was a little tall. He looked coldly at Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound. Lowly human? Lowly human? Both Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound were stunned. Yi Xian looked at the Emperor Hound. Brother D, I'll give you face, come at me. The Emperor Hound suddenly said angrily, lowly your mother? At this moment, the old man suddenly looked at the Emperor Hound, his eyes slightly narrowed. Where did this beast come from? How dare you talk nonsense here? Are you tired of living? The Emperor Hound suddenly leaped up and slapped the old man. The old man smiled coldly, punching out. Rumble. The Emperor Hound was forced back to its original place, but the old man also retreated a full 1,000 feet. The old man looked at the Emperor Hound, frowning slightly. I didn't expect a beast like you to have some ability. Next to the Emperor Hound, Yi Xian was a little confused. He doesn't know you? The Emperor Hound said, I didn't transform. Yi Xian was taken aback, then said, you transformed. The Emperor Hound's face was a little ugly. I still can't transform. Yi Xian. Not far away, the old man suddenly said, lowly human, this old man will give you a chance. Take this beast and get out of my god race's territory or else. At this moment, the word dream quietly appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows. A moment later, Yi Xian appeared in front of the old man, his sword pressed against the old man's eyebrows. The old man's face was full of disbelief. The next moment he said angrily, lowly human you. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword suddenly stabbed into the old man's mouth, then lightly twisted. The old man's tongue was directly crushed. The old man's eyes were wide open, full of savagery, but he did not dare to move, because Yi Xian's sword had already stabbed into his throat. If it went any further, he would definitely die. Yi Xian looked at the Emperor Hound. Is the god race's sense of superiority innate? The Emperor Hound hesitated, then said, actually he is already considered low-key. Yi Xian. Chapter 501. Yi Xian was speechless when he heard the Emperor Hound's words. Was this old man already keeping a low profile? At this moment he truly felt how arrogant the Protoss were. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at the Emperor Hound. Brother D, how should we deal with this person? The Emperor Hound said calmly, don't give me any face. Yi Xian nodded slightly and raised his sword. The old man's head flew off instantly. In the air the old man's head slowly fell. His eyes were wide open. He had never thought that he would die just like that. Yi Xian looked forward and said softly, Brother Emperor Hound, I'm afraid it won't be easy to negotiate with the Protoss this time. The Emperor Hound's face was gloomy and it did not speak. The Protoss. Actually, as a member of the Protoss, it also had its own pride. However, after being locked up for so many years, it had figured out many things. The Protoss were actually not the strongest in this vast universe, especially after seeing Yi Xian's world prison pagoda Di Xing, and that swordsman. The Protoss had already declined. Forget about declining, even at their peak there was nothing to be proud of. Forget about the mysterious swordsman, even that Di Xing was not someone the Protoss could contend against. Now, the Protoss could be said to be like stray dogs. If they were still arrogant at this time they would be courting death. Without strength they had to be more temperamental. However, after seeing the Protoss just now, it knew that the Protoss' habit of looking down on everyone and everything else had not changed. As if he knew what the Emperor Hound was thinking, Yi Xian comforted it. Brother D, I believe that not everyone in the Protoss is like that old man. The Emperor Hound sighed softly. The Protoss call themselves gods. Therefore they are very disdainful of other races, especially humans. This is because during the Protoss era humans were the Protoss servants. At this point it looked at Yi Xian. They despise and disdain humans from the bottom of their hearts, just like how humans treat livestock. Yi Xian shook his head. If the survivors of your god race still have this mentality, forgive me for being blunt, then there's really no hope. The Emperor Hound nodded. If they're really like this, then it's best that she doesn't come. Otherwise the god clan will be completely slaughtered. Yi Xian was just about to speak when the space in front of them suddenly trembled. Soon, a middle-aged man appeared in front of Yi Xian and the Emperor Dog. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and frowned. Human? Yi Xian nodded. Human. The middle-aged man's eyes turned cold. You killed a member of my god race. Yi Xian said, kill him. The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian. How did you know that my god race is here? Yi Xian looked at the Archhound and said, Brother the Archhound, I think it's better if you pretend to be someone else. Otherwise we might have to fight to the death with the god race. The Archhound walked in front of the middle-aged man and looked at him coldly. What? Does no one in the god race recognize me now? The middle-aged man stared at the Archhound. After a while he frowned. Where did you come from, beast? You. The Archhound suddenly flew into a rage. Beast my ass. As soon as it finished speaking, it leaped. The middle-aged man's expression changed and he slammed his right hand down. Boom. With a loud explosion, the Archhound was sent flying hundreds of meters away. However, the middle-aged man was also sent flying hundreds of meters back. The middle-aged man was shocked. He looked at the Archhound with a serious expression. I didn't expect a beast like you to have some ability. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly felt like laughing, but he held it in. As for the Archhound, it was about to explode with rage. It couldn't transform now, so it couldn't display its full strength. Otherwise, apart from a few people in the god race, no one would be a match for it. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man spoke abruptly, no matter who you are, since you dared to kill a member of my god race, then prepare to suffer the wrath of my god race. As soon as he finished speaking he was about to attack. However, a voice suddenly resounded. Stop. As soon as the voice resounded, the dream character on Yi Xian's forehead silently vanished. A woman had suddenly appeared behind the middle-aged man. She wore a loose robe, had long hair that draped over her shoulders, and had a delicate face. She was very beautiful. The middle-aged man hurriedly bowed when he saw the woman. Goddess. The woman nodded slightly, and then she walked over to Yi Xian and the Archhound. She glanced at Yi Xian, but there was no disdain in her eyes. She was very calm. In next to no time she looked at the Archhound. When she saw it she suddenly frowned. A short while later, a trace of disbelief appeared in her eyes. You're the Archhound? The Archhound glanced coldly at the woman and didn't speak. The woman's expression gradually softened. You've left the god race for many years. It's normal that they don't recognize you. The Archhound looked at the woman. You're the current leader of the god race? The woman nodded. Yes. As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian. Who is he? Yi Xian smiled. I'm brother the Archhound's friend. Friend. The woman frowned. Friend? Yi Xian nodded. Friend. At this time, the middle-aged man not far away suddenly said coldly, how can a member of the god race be friends with a human? Why not? The Archhound suddenly said, he's my friend. Bite us. The middle-aged man's face was livid with anger. He glared at the Archhound. You are the guardian beast of the god race. How can you lower yourself to be friends with a lowly human? You're disgracing the god race. Yi Xian was dumbfounded by what he heard. He wasn't angry. On the contrary, he wanted to laugh. The Archhound's expression was extremely ugly. This time, it had brought Yi Xian back in the hope that through his relationship with Yi Xian, the relationship between the god race and Jian Zizai could be eased. Moreover, it also hoped that Yi Xian could be on good terms with the god race. This was because after getting along with Yi Xian's strength and potential were very terrifying. If the god race could be on good terms with Yi Xian, it would undoubtedly be a very good thing for the god race. However, it didn't expect that so many unpleasantries would happen as soon as it came here. The Archhound suddenly felt a little disheartened. It looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. As it spoke, it turned and left. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Originally, he also wanted to be friends with the god race. If possible, he wanted to ease the relationship between Jian Zizai and the god race. Now, however, he felt that he was thinking too much. He didn't want to come into contact with the god race at all. Yi Xian and the Archhound turned and left. At this moment, the woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the Archhound. She looked at the Archhound and asked, You're leaving? The Archhound said indifferently, If I'm not leaving, then what are you staying here for? The woman said in a low voice, You're the divine protector of my god race. The Archhound sneered. Didn't you hear them call me a beast? Besides, don't talk to me about righteousness. I fought for the god race until the end. If it weren't for that group of people from back then, would all of you still be alive now? The woman fell silent for a moment, and then she looked at Yi Xian. I hope you can forgive me if I offended you earlier. Yi Xian smiled and said, I can't see your sincerity. The woman's expression was calm. The middle-aged man behind her sneered. If you want to gain the respect of others, then you have to have the strength to do so. If you don't have the strength, then you're delusional enough to gain the respect of others. That's idiocy. A dream character silently appeared between Yi Xian's brows. The woman's expression instantly changed drastically, and a moment later, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. The woman turned around to look at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was slightly dazed, and he was just about to speak when his right arm suddenly fell off and blood sprayed out like a fountain. The middle-aged man was horrified when he witnessed this scene, and he gazed at Yi Xian with disbelief. You. Yi Xian smiled and said, Now shut up. If you speak another word, then I'll make it so that you'll never be able to speak again for the rest of your life. The middle-aged man was just about to say something when the woman suddenly shouted furiously, Stand down. The middle-aged man's expression was slightly unsightly, but he didn't dare disobey the woman and immediately retreated. The woman gazed at Yi Xian. She just stared at Yi Xian and said, I hope you can forgive me if I offended you earlier. Yi Xian smiled and then he gazed at the Archhound. He didn't like the god race and it should be said that he hated it. However, he respected the Archhound. If the Archhound wanted to stay behind, then he would stay behind as well. He didn't want to help the god race, but he would help the Archhound. The Archhound fell silent for a moment before it said, Take us there. I want to see how the god race is doing now. The woman nodded slightly. Come with me. As she spoke, she waved her hand, and a teleportation formation appeared beneath Yi Xian and the Archhound. In the next moment, Yi Xian and the Archhound vanished on the spot. In next to no time, Yi Xian and the Archhound had appeared beneath a set of stone steps. Yi Xian raised his head and saw that the stone steps continued upwards for over 10 kilometers, and there was an enormous palace at the end of them. Grand. This was Yi Xian's first impression upon seeing it. This palace was much more grand than the palace he'd seen in the Sword Sect. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, the woman suddenly said, It's worlds apart from all those years ago. All those years ago, my god race was the most grand in the universe. But now, most of its buildings have vanished. As she spoke, she raised her head and gazed at the palace at the end of the stone steps. That's the last divine hall. A divine hall. The Archhound spoke in a low voice, How many members of the god race do we have now? The woman replied, Over 13,000. The archhound's face fell when it heard this. All those years ago the god race had over 100 million members. Suddenly, 4 experts in golden armor and spears in their hands appeared around Yi Xian and the archhound. Moreover, an enormous golden net suddenly appeared around Yi Xian and the archhound, and it directly enveloped Yi Xian and the archhound. Yi Xian's face remained emotionless when he witnessed this scene, but the archhound's face had turned gloomy. An old man slowly walked down the stone steps. Next to him was the middle-aged man whose right arm had been cut off by Yi Xian. The old man and the middle-aged man walked in front of Yi Xian, and the middle-aged man looked coldly at Yi Xian. "You human you." At this moment the word dream quietly appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows. The next moment the middle-aged man's head flew off. Yi Xian was still standing where he was. Looking at the head that had flown away, he said calmly, "I told you to shut up, but you didn't. Then shut up forever." As he spoke, he looked at the old man with an extremely gloomy expression. "I'm very angry now." As soon as he spoke, the heads of the 4 experts in golden armor to the right of him and the archhound suddenly flew off at the same time. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Chapter 502. Anger. That was what Yi Xian was feeling at the moment. The old man stared at Yi Xian. At this moment, there was a hint of fear in his eyes. Instant kill. The speed at which Yi Xian had attacked was terrifying. Even the old man had only been able to sense a vague trace. Moreover, when Yi Xian had attacked, there seemed to be a mysterious power. It was because of this mysterious power that the middle-aged man and the others had been unable to retaliate at all. At that moment, the Emperor Dog suddenly said, "What are you trying to do?" The Emperor Dog's eyes were filled with ruthlessness. Yi Xian was not the only one who was angry. The Emperor Dog was truly enraged as well. The woman next to Yi Xian looked at the old man and asked, "Elder Ji, what do you mean?" The old man said coldly, "What do I mean?" As he said that, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "This human killed my people, yet you brought him into the God clan. You still ask me what I mean?" The woman looked straight at the old man and said, "He is a guest of the God clan." The old man sneered, "Guest? Lianwan, are you joking? You actually treat a human as a guest, you?" At that moment, the Emperor Dog next to Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. The old man's expression changed and he crossed his arms in front of him to block it. Bang! With a loud explosion, the old man was instantly knocked back hundreds of meters by the Emperor Dog. In the next moment, the Emperor Dog charged at the old man again. At that moment, some golden armored guards suddenly appeared around them. The woman suddenly waved her right hand and said, "Stand down." The golden armored guards hesitated for a moment before retreating to the side. On the stone steps, the Emperor Dog and the old man were already fighting. Next to the woman, Yi Xian said, "It seems that your position in the God clan is not that secure." The woman called Lianwan was expressionless and did not speak. Yi Xian looked up at the sky. At that moment, the Emperor Dog had completely suppressed the old man. However, the old man was not weak either. Therefore, it was clear that the man and the beast would not be able to determine a victor in a short period of time. At this moment, Yi Xian gently pointed with his fingers. In the air, the expression of the old man fighting the Emperor Hound suddenly changed. In the next instant, he dodged 1,000 feet to the left. As soon as the old man stopped, his arms suddenly fell off his shoulders. Lian Wanner took a deep look at Yi Xian, and there was a hint of seriousness and fear in her eyes. In the air, the armless old man was greatly shocked. He retreated rapidly until he was right in front of the shrine. The Emperor Hound did not attack again. It returned to Yi Xian's side and looked at Lian Wanner. "I want to borrow the holy spring." Lian Wanner hesitated. The Monarch Hound's expression turned cold. "Am I not qualified?" Lian Wanner sighed in a low voice. "Of course you are qualified, but there isn't much of the holy spring left now," the Sovereign Hound said. "I don't need much, just a little to recover." Lian Wanner looked at the Emperor Hound. "If you recover, will you stay in the clan?" Yi Xian also looked at the Monarch Hound. The Monarch Hound was silent. Yi Xian smiled. "Brother Monarch Hound, if you want to stay here, I will respect your decision." The Monarch Hound shook its head. "I promise to follow you for 3 years, so it will be 3 years. Hearing this, Lian Wanner frowned. "But you are a god," the Monarch Hound said impatiently. "Back then I risked my life for the God clan. Now I can't even use a little holy spring?" Lian Wanner fell silent. The Monarch Hound's expression gradually turned cold, and its eyes filled with undisguised killing intent. Seeing this, Lian Wanner's expression sank. "You can use the holy spring, but I have a condition. After 3 years you must return to the God clan. The monarch hound shook its head. I won't be coming back. Lien Waner frowned. Why? The monarch hound looked around and then said softly, this God clan gives me a strange feeling. Strange. At this moment, it no longer had any beautiful fantasies of revitalizing the God clan. It could not see any hope for such a clan. Lien Waner still wanted to say something, but the monarch hound shook its head. Take me to the holy spring. I won't need much. Lien Waner glanced at the monarch hound and said, come with me. After saying that, she turned and left. In the end, she still chose to give it to the holy spring because she knew that if she did not, the monarch hound would definitely snatch it. The current monarch hound was not very scary, but the swordsman next to it was not an ordinary kind of scary. She was more afraid of Yi Xian's flying sword. Soon Lien Waner brought the monarch hound to a pool. In the middle of the pool there was a whirlpool. Lien Waner pointed at the whirlpool in the distance. That's it. The monarch hound nodded slightly and leaped into the whirlpool. Beside Yi Xian, Lien Waner asked softly, are the humans very strong in the outside world now? Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. Were the humans weak in the God clan's era? Lien Waner nodded. Very weak. At that time, the humans didn't even have their own martial arts civilization. Yi Xian said softly, times have changed. Lien Waner looked at the sky, somewhat at a loss. Indeed, this is no longer the God clan's era. Yi Xian looked at Lien Waner. He had to admit that this woman was very beautiful. She belonged to the type that was breathtaking at first glance. At this time, Lien Waner looked at Yi Xian. You and it must have other reasons for coming to my God clan this time. Yi Xian looked at the whirlpool in the distance. It wants to revitalize the God clan. Lien Waner shook her head. Difficult. Yi Xian asked, do you know Jian Zizai? Hearing this, Lien Waner's expression changed drastically. She stared at Yi Xian. How do you know her? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, she's my sister. Lien Waner said coldly, impossible. You are not a member of my God clan. My God clan's divine child has fallen in the past. You, divine child. Yi Xian was stunned. He turned and pointed at the emperor dog in the whirlpool not far away. Do you know why it is following me? Lien Waner's expression turned ugly. You can't be the divine child. The divine child has fallen? At this point, she seemed to have thought of something. She looked at Yi Xian in shock. You are the reincarnation of a god? Yi Xian was expressionless. I didn't say anything. Lien Waner looked at Yi Xian for a long time. She said coldly, impossible. If you are the reincarnation of a divine child, she will never let you go. Yi Xian said calmly, she even let the emperor dog go. Why wouldn't she let me go? Lien Waner was silent. Her expression was somewhat gloomy. At this time Yi Xian said, of course the rise and fall of the God clan has nothing to do with me. If brother emperor dog hadn't asked me to come, I wouldn't have come. As for my sister Jian Zizai, I don't intend to let her come either. As if thinking of something, Lien Waner hurriedly said, You mean she no longer hates the God clan? Yi Xian said calmly, if she still hates the God clan, why would the emperor dog and I return here? Lien Waner was silent. At this moment, the whirlpool not far away suddenly trembled. Soon the emperor dog flew out and landed in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian found that the emperor dog seemed to have changed. The emperor dog glanced at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. At this moment, Lien Waner suddenly looked at the emperor dog. He is the divine child of the God clan? The emperor dog was stunned. Yi Xian suddenly said, don't you want to help the God clan? I think this method will work. Emperor dog. Seeing that the emperor dog was stunned, Lien Waner frowned. At this time the emperor dog suddenly said, how do you know? Lien Waner said, is he really? The emperor dog was about to speak when Yi Xian said calmly, why are you mentioning this? The rise and fall of the God clan has nothing to do with me. Even if it did, it would have happened in my previous life. It has nothing to do with me in this life. The emperor dog said angrily, how can it have nothing to do with you? You are the divine child of the God clan. The prosperity of the God clan is your responsibility. Yi Xian coldly snorted. The revival of the God clan? Sorry, I don't see any hope. Let's go. The emperor dog was about to say something when Lien Waner suddenly said, how can you think that? Yi Xian looked at Lien Waner. The latter said, there are only 10,000 God clan members left, and they can only struggle at death's door. Do you have the heart to watch the God clan continue to decline? Yi Xian looked at Lian Wan'er and said, It's not that I have the heart to watch the God clan decline, but the God clan has chosen to decline. Lian Wan'er looked at Yi Xian. What do you mean? Yi Xian sneered. What do I mean? The God clan is still arrogant. They have no strength, yet they look down on everyone. With this mentality, how can they revive? Lian Wan'er's face was a bit ugly. Yi Xian continued, If the God clan really wants to revive, you must first put down the arrogance in your hearts. At this point he looked at Lian Wan. I think you haven't gone out yet. I suggest you go out and see the outside world. Then he looked at the Emperor Dog. Let's go. The Emperor Dog nodded. Yi Xian left with the Emperor Dog. But after a few steps, Lian Wan suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She looked at the Emperor Dog and asked, You know Jane? Princess Jane? The Emperor Dog nodded. He knows her. Lian Wan'er said, She really doesn't hate the God clan now? The Emperor Dog said, If she does, she won't let me go. As it spoke, it looked at Lian Wan'er and sent her a voice transmission with profound energy. You have seen his strength and talent. If the God clan really wants to revive, there will be some hope with him. Otherwise, the God clan can only linger here forever, waiting for a genius to appear. Lian Wan'er was silent for a long time. Then she said, He doesn't care about the God clan. The Emperor Dog said in a low voice, You don't care about him, so why should he care about the God clan? Moreover, Jane, she thinks highly of him. She even personally asked the Underworld King for the Underworld clan's supreme treasure, the soul-subduing sword. The Underworld King. Lian Wan'er frowned slightly. The Underworld King is also here? The Emperor Dog nodded. It looked at Lian Wan'er. You are now the leader of the God clan. The future of the God clan is up to you. It still cared about the God clan and hoped that the God clan could be on good terms with Yi Xian. Because after interacting with Yi Xian, it found that even though Yi Xian was usually slippery, he was still very moral. If the God clan were to be on good terms with Yi Xian, it would only bring harm and no benefit. Lian Wan'er was silent for a moment, and then she looked at Yi Xian. If you lead the God clan, how will it revive? Yi Xian thought about it and said, How many treasures does the God clan have now? Lian Wan'er, the Emperor Dog. Chapter 503. The Emperor Hound's expression was somewhat strange. Treasures? After interacting with Yi Xian, it understood Yi Xian's character very well. This was definitely a fellow who valued wealth as much as his life. Lian Wan'er looked at Yi Xian warily. Why are you doing this? Yi Xian's face sank. What's with your expressions? Do you think I'm coveting the God race's treasures? The Emperor Hound glanced indifferently at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Lian Wan'er became even more vigilant. Yi Xian sighed softly. The reason I ask this is because I want to know the current wealth of the God race. If we don't have any wealth at all, how can we develop? Lian Wan'er fell silent for a moment before she said, The God race didn't leave behind many treasures and violet origin crystals. Now, my God race has 12 creation realm treasures, 172 immortal artifacts, and 372 divine artifacts. There should be close to 10 billion violet origin crystals. Next to him, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. 12 creation realm treasures. 12. Yi Xian was stunned. He only had 4 creation realm treasures now. They were the soul-suppressing sword, the Moke sword, the Emperor starship, and the pair of unknown arms. He knew very well how powerful these 4 creation realm treasures were, especially the soul-suppressing sword. It could split a person's soul with a single strike and kill without a sound. It could be said to be extremely terrifying. He hadn't expected the God race to have 12. Moreover, there were close to 200 immortal artifacts. And by Lai's violet origin crystals. Rich. Not just any rich. Right at this moment, Lian Wan'er said, Besides these, my God clan has another precious treasure, a Tao realm precious treasure. Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound looked at Lian Wan'er. Lian Wan'er said, The Divine King's Throne. The Divine King's Throne. Yi Xian said, This is a Tao realm treasure? Lian Wan'er nodded. But no one in my God race can use it. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why? The Emperor Hound said, Only those with royal blood can use it. Royal bloodline. Yi Xian was stunned. Didn't this mean that only Jian Zizai could use it? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian looked at Lian Wan'er and asked, Can you take me there? Lian Wan'er hesitated for a moment and said, It's best that you don't. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Lian Wan'er said, This thing is sealed in one place. It is incomparably violent and we don't dare to approach it. Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's fine, you can take me there to have a look." Lian Wanner nodded. "Follow me." With that she turned around and left. Beside Yi Xian, the sovereign hound wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Brother D is worried that I only want the celestial race's treasures and not sincerely want to help the celestial race, right?" The emperor dog nodded. "That's exactly what I think." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'll tell you the truth. Although I want the celestial race's treasures, I also sincerely want to help the celestial race." The emperor dog looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, "There are two reasons. First, it's because of you. Brother Sovereign Hound, you've helped me a lot. Second, I also hope that the celestial race is strong enough. A strong celestial race is also good for me." Allies. The incident in the never-ending starfield made him realize that one person's strength was still a little weak. If possible, there was no harm in making more friends and allies. The emperor dog nodded and did not speak again. It would be best if the celestial race and Yi Xian could help each other. Especially the relationship between Yi Xian and Jian Zizai. Could see that Jian Zizai cared a lot about Yi Xian. Otherwise, he would not have asked Hades for the soul-subduing sword. In addition, it found that Yi Xian was not a simple guy. That tower, the sword on top of the tower, in short, in its heart, Yi Xian was a very mysterious guy. If the celestial race and Yi Xian joined forces, it would be a good thing for both Yi Xian and the celestial race. After a while, Lian Wan brought Yi Xian and the emperor dog to a secret room. The secret room was surrounded by all kinds of mysterious talismans. In addition, there were black chains as thick as an arm. Lian Wan looked at Yi Xian and said, "It's inside." Yi Xian nodded and was about to go in. At that moment, Lian Wan said, "Be careful." Yi Xian asked, "How long have you trapped it?" Lian Wan shook her head. "A very, very long time. I don't know exactly how long. I only know that when the older generation was still here, it was already trapped here." Yi Xian said softly, "It seems that it hasn't been trapped for long." As he said that, he pushed open the door of the secret room and walked in. The secret room was empty. In the center there was a chair. The chair looked like an ordinary chair. There was nothing special about it. On the back of the chair there was a sword with a golden scabbard. Yi Xian walked in front of the chair. Beside him was the emperor dog. At that moment he and the emperor dog were both on guard. A Dao realm treasure. This was the first time he had seen one. As for the world prison tower, it was a supreme treasure in his heart. Yi Xian looked at the divine king's throne. "Is this chair very powerful?" The emperor dog's expression was somewhat serious. "Very powerful. Back then, my celestial race's patriarch relied on it to contend against her." Her? Yi Xian was stunned. Soon he knew who the emperor dog was talking about. Jian Zizai. Needless to say, what Jian Zizai did in the past was very bloody. Because he found that the celestial race was really afraid of Jian Zizai. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian looked at the emperor dog. "Contend against her? Are you saying that your celestial race's patriarch relied on this to contend against her?" The emperor dog nodded. He only resisted for a while and then, there was no then. Yi Xian was speechless. Jian Zizai. Yi Xian looked at the divine king's throne. He found that Jian Zizai's strength might not be much weaker than Emperor Xing. Of course, there was definitely a gap. Otherwise, Jian Zizai would not be one level lower than Emperor Xing. Of course, in terms of intelligence, Jian Zizai was definitely above Emperor Xing. Because Jian Zizai gave up the world prison tower. It should be said that Jian Zizai was not as arrogant as Emperor Xing. People who were arrogant usually died quickly. At that moment, the emperor dog suddenly pointed at the divine king's throne. "Do you see that sword?" Yi Xian looked at the sword with the golden scabbard. "What sword is that?" The emperor dog said, "The divine king's sword. It is as famous as the soul-suppressing sword of the nether race." It was as famous as soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he said, "As famous as soul-suppressing sword?" The emperor dog nodded. Yi Xian looked at the divine king's sword. His heart was burning. If it was as famous as soul-suppressing sword, it meant that the sword's effect was definitely not lower than soul's. One had to know that soul-suppressing sword's effect was somewhat heaven-defying. It could be said that soul-suppressing sword and soul-setting sword could be considered his most powerful move in close combat. At that moment, the divine king's throne suddenly trembled. The expressions of Yi Xian and the emperor dog changed. The two of them took a few steps back. The emperor dog said in a low voice, "If you want it, you must sit on it." "Sit on it?" Yi Xian looked at the emperor dog. "If I sit on it, can I still get down?" The emperor dog said in a low voice, "I don't know." Xian was speechless. At that moment, Lian Wana walked in. She looked at Xian and said, "If you can subdue it, no one in my god race will refuse to submit to you. And you will also be able to obtain a Dao realm treasure." Xian said, "You don't seem to mind if I take this divine king's throne away." Lian Wana said softly, "This item is left here. To us, it is an uncertain factor because no one in the god race can control it. If you can subdue it and take it away, I can't ask for more." Xian looked at the divine king's throne. He walked in front of it. As he looked at the divine king's throne, Xian's expression gradually turned serious. This divine king's throne looked like an ordinary chair, but he knew that if he sat on it, he probably wouldn't be able to get down. The emperor dog said in a low voice, "Do you want to try?" Lian Wan also looked at Xian. She wanted to let Xian try because she wanted to see if Xian was the reincarnation of the Son of God. Moreover, she also wanted to see Xian's true strength. If Xian couldn't take it away, then this divine king's throne would still belong to the god race. If Xian could take it away, then it proved that even if Xian wasn't the reincarnation of the Son of God, he was definitely not an ordinary person. This kind of person was worth befriending. Moreover, as she said, this divine king's throne was useless to the god race. On the contrary, it was a threat. Because not only could the god race not subdue the divine king's throne, no one could continue sealing it. Once the sealing time was up, the god race would be in danger. In front of the divine king's throne, Xian stood for a long time. To sit or not to sit? Xian didn't think too much about it and directly sat on it. The timid would starve to death, the bold would die. Of course, the reason why he was so confident was because of the world prison pagoda. No matter how powerful this divine king's throne was, could it be more powerful than the world prison pagoda? He had already decided that if he couldn't do it, he would just drag the throne into the pagoda. However, just as he sat on the divine king's throne, it suddenly shook violently. The next moment Xian disappeared. Seeing this, Lian Wan and the Emperor Hound were stunned. Where did he go? Lian Wan looked around and finally looked at the Emperor Hound. The Emperor Hound's face was gloomy, and it was unknown what it was thinking. At this moment, a petite figure suddenly appeared in front of the Emperor Hound and Lian Wan. It was Xiaoling. Xiaoling looked around, then looked at the Emperor Hound. Where is he? The Emperor Hound naturally knew who Xiaoling was talking about. It immediately pointed at the divine king's throne. He was taken away. Xiaoling's face darkened. The Emperor Hound asked, "What's wrong?" Xiaoling said, "He's in danger. I can feel that he's in danger." As she spoke, she suddenly pointed at the divine king's throne angrily. "Hand him over." The Emperor Hound, Lian Wan's expression was also somewhat strange. Seeing that the divine king's throne didn't respond, Xiaoling flew into a rage and slapped the throne. Bang! This slap sent Xiaoling flying into the wall, causing the entire wall to shake violently. On the ground, Xiaoling crawled up and rubbed her little butt, feeling extremely wronged. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pointed at the divine king's throne. You wait. You can't run." After saying that, she disappeared directly. Lian Wan looked at the Emperor Hound. "What is she doing?" The Emperor Hound said in a low voice, "I don't know, but it's not anything good." At this moment, Xiaoling appeared in front of the Emperor Hound and Lian Wan. In her hand there was a sword. Seeing this sword, the Emperor Hound's expression changed. Not far away, Xiaoling suddenly rushed towards the divine king's throne with the sword. "Yeah. I'll chop you to death." Not far away, the divine king's throne suddenly turned and ran. The Emperor Hound. At this moment, Lian Wan's expression suddenly changed. "Her sword is breaking the seal. Hurry up and make her stop." The Emperor Hound didn't move. Lian Wan looked at the Emperor Hound. The Emperor Hound said in a low voice, "I'm afraid of being cut." Lian Wan You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.